Our story opens with Yuto, a young man who perishes in a car crash after pushing a girl to safety. Never feeling loved by his birth family, he accepts his sudden death without regret. Instead of ending, his consciousness awakens in a fantasy realm inside the body of an infant named Toven. His new parents, Garen and Alyssa, shower him with warmth alongside his gentle older brother, Barrick. Though the family lives modestly in a small cottage perched on a hillside, Tobin finds far greater contentment here than in his previous existence. In this realm, every child receives a divine gift known as a skill upon reaching 5 years old. Barrick awakens charisma, an exceptional talent that naturally commands authority and respect. Young Tovin spends his early years playing with his brother and tending crops alongside his father. He quickly realizes his father, Garen, possesses remarkable dignity, yet the townspeople treat him with quiet disdain. Upon turning 5, Tovin visits the local sanctuary for his own awakening ceremony. At the temple, he crosses paths with an arrogant nobleman named Halvek and his malicious son, Orion. Orion snatches a plaything from a quiet girl named Neris, but Tovin steps forward and reclaims it. As Orion moves to strike, Garen intervenes with a dark, troubled expression on his face. An ancient tension clearly simmers between Garen and the noble family, but soon, Tovin approaches the altar. A blinding golden radiance floods the sanctuary, convincing the audience that a prodigy stands before them. Yet the presiding priest announces that Tovin merely received a common trait called Everycraft. In this world, Everycraft carries a stigma, a jack-of-all-trades gift that prevents true mastery in any domain. Amidst the crowd's pity and Orion's mocking laughter, Tovin inspects his status stone closer. The glowing inscription actually reads, Super Everycraft, a detail invisible to everyone else. Undeterred by their scorn, Tovin vows to harness this secret gift to protect his beloved family. Returning home, Tovin shares his result, causing his mother Alyssa to faint from shock. Their maid, Sabet, breaks down in tears, convinced the boy's future is ruined. Garen gently explains that the skill offers versatility at the cost of true expertise. Despite the disappointing outcome, his family surrounds him with unwavering love. Garen even pledges to enroll him in a prestigious academy 5 years down the road. That night in his dreams, Tovin encounters an unkempt demon lord named Nazar. Nazar reveals that he personally bestowed the upgraded version of the skill. This hidden blessing bypasses mortal limitations, allowing complete mastery over combat and magic, though it offers no advantages for leadership or mental abilities. Reinvigorated by the truth, Tovin commits to pushing his physical limits through rigorous daily training. During these early years of preparation, Tovin befriends a young girl named Rena who can speak with beasts. When Rena vanishes into the mountain wilderness, Tovin and Barrick set out to search for her. A ferocious bear nearly mauls the brothers before a sorceress named Marielle intervenes with deadly arcana. Marielle reveals herself as a clumsy researcher who is simply watching over the young girl. Impressed by Tovin, she agrees to tutor him in magic, granting him a head start before academy life. Garen eventually tracks down the boys and reprimands their recklessness, but Tovin remains thrilled to have unlocked a path toward real power. The family later visits Marielle's cottage to express their gratitude for rescuing Rena. Alyssa bonds instantly with the eccentric witch, formalizing an agreement for the boys' magical instruction. During their initial lesson, Marielle explains that mana functions like a finite reservoir. If a caster overexerts their reserve, exhaustion or unconsciousness quickly follows. While Barrick struggles with control, Tovin's unique blessing allows him to ignite a flame effortlessly. Realizing his comprehension far exceeds normal human limits, Tovin doubles his daily practice. Take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe for more fantasy stories. Drop a comment below saying, "Loving this." Let's see who makes it to the end. Most people won't take the challenge, but true fans always deliver. Now back to our story. During the annual town festival, Tovin catches Sabet quietly slipping into Lord Halvek's estate. Shadowing her inside, he eavesdrops on a conversation that shatters his understanding of the past. Halvek was once a treacherous servant who usurped Garen's noble title through an ambush that nearly killed Barrick. Sabet was only feeding information to the tyrant to afford medicine for her ailing mother. When Halvek corners the maid, Tovin casts a subtle fire spark as a distraction, allowing her to flee. Understanding the cruelty behind his family's downfall, Tovin swears to tear Halvek down. 3 years pass in relentless study, bringing Tovin to 8 years old. Secretly training under Marielle, he masters advanced spells that typically require decades of discipline. He even begins refining high-tier stealth magic, such as complete optical concealment, though maintaining the illusion drains his mana rapidly. Brick by brick, His strength surpasses anything expected of a child his age, just as his older brother Barrack prepares for his journey to the Grand Academy. Tovin focuses entirely on cultivating his strength to avenge his family against those who wronged them. The long-awaited day arrives as Barrack leaves home to enroll in Oblivion Academy. High tuition costs place a heavy financial strain on the household. Tovin notices his parents skipping meals and patching threadbare clothes to afford the fees. Watching them waste away fuels his desire to earn money and lighten their burden. During the farewells, a pretty brown-haired girl named Rena arrives. Astonishment strikes Tovin as he realizes his former childhood playmate was female all along. Barrack clearly knew the truth, harboring deep feelings for her all along. Gathering his nerve on the spot, Barrack asks Rena to marry him once they reach adulthood. She eagerly accepts, bringing joy to the entire family. Headmaster Marin takes the stage at the orientation ceremony to address the incoming class. The wise principal declares that social status holds no weight within these walls. Inspired by the speech, Tovin counts down the 2 years until his own enrollment. Within a single week, Barrack becomes the talk of the entire campus. The grueling secret training Tovin forced upon him yields immediate results. Barrack far surpasses his peers in speed and physical strength. His mana capacity and spell control dwarf those of the wealthiest noble heirs. Seeking to aid his parents, Tovin asks permission to take jobs at the local adventurers guild, though his mother and father hesitate over his young age. Endorsement from their magic tutor Marielle finally convinces them to consent. Accompanying his father to the hall, Tovin meets Sedwin, the front desk receptionist. The guild staff still treat Garen with reverence, remembering his former standing as lord. Registering as a rookie, Tovin accepts a basic request to chop 30 logs. Tapping into his hidden abilities, he clears the entire pile in 15 minutes flat. His first earnings go toward gifts, including sturdy work gloves for his father, which moves the family to tears. 6 months pass, bringing Tovin to his 9th birthday. Relentless work ethic earns him a reputation for taking every undesirable contract in town. While tailing the skilled adventurer Kyra on a slime hunt, a rogue creature ambushes them, forcing Tovin instinctively unleashes ancient flight magic alongside a blazing fire spell to vaporize it. Stunned, Kyra stares at a child casting magic far beyond advanced academy standards. Recognizing him as the fallen lord's son, she marks him as a true prodigy. Senior guild members catch wind of his miraculous feat. Yet, they vow silence to shield the boy from the corrupt noble Halvek. Sometime later, Barrack's instructor, the battle-hardened Draven, visits the household. Coming upon the courtyard, the veteran watches Tovin and Rena spar. Masterful swordplay from a young child leaves the war demon thoroughly impressed. Overjoyed by the discovery, Draven resolves to claim Tovin as his personal student upon his enrollment. Time passes until Tovin reaches 10, ready for the academy entrance. A lively celebration marks his 10th birthday with family and friends. When he offers his guild savings to cover his tuition, Garen insists he keep the money. Bumper harvests from their crops have brought prosperous sales across neighboring towns. News arrives that Farah secured a guild scholarship, joining him in the freshman class. On day 1, Tovin reunites with Neris, whom he saved years ago, alongside her boisterous sister Vereen. The arrogant Halvek and his son Orion approach to mock Tovin's seemingly weak aptitude. As Orion tries to corner Farah, Barrack interposes with a terrifying smile to drive him back. Class assignment places Tovin in Class A together with Farah, Neris, and Kaelin. Taking charge of the room, Draven makes it clear that titles mean nothing in his hall. The fierce instructor warns Orion directly that commoners and nobles stand on equal footing here. He adds that anyone dissatisfied with the rules can take their complaints to the king. Tovin meets his classmates: scholarly Wilkin, mighty Branya, loud Fendril, aspiring idol Astrid, brawler Renica, and spirit medium Ivarn. During fitness evaluations, Tovin and Farah suppress their power, yet easily outperform the rest of the class. Driven to win, Renica sprinted with wild intensity until she tripped and knocked herself out at the line. Watching the commotion, Tovin realizes that despite holding back, his foundation already sets him apart as the class moves on to the jumping test. Deliberately capping his score, Tovin lets the pompous Orion gloat over taking top rank. Intent on avoiding unwanted attention, he places comfortably in the middle of the pack. He resolves to pay no mind to Orion's petty behavior. Moving to magic testing, Draven commands every student to cast a basic fire spell. While most struggle with casting, Neris manifests a clean flame. Farah sparks awe across the yard by igniting fire directly from her fingertips, which, that standard, proves tough for Orion, whose boastful talk yields nothing more than a tiny, pathetic spark. Taking his turn last, Tovin releases a small, unassuming flame that appears weak at first glance, yet it punches a clean, precise hole straight through the target. Of everyone present, Only Draven recognizes the sheer amount of power Toven is suppressing. Once class ends, Toven sits down for lunch alongside his brother and their companions. Neris's wild sister Vereen unpredictably snatches and eats Toven's meal, though she hands him several massive rice balls to make up for the theft. Observing her behavior, Toven senses she is simply lonely and weighed down by her overbearing father. At the end of the day, Orion attempts to pick another fight, but Toven firmly reminds him of his personal boundaries. Should Orion continue acting like a bully, Toven promises to treat him as completely invisible. Toven advises the noble boy to return home and ask his father why their two families harbor such a deep feud. Sometime later, Toven steps into the Adventurers Guild and secures a meeting with the leader, Ordwin. As it turns out, Ordwin holds Toven's father, Garen, in extraordinarily high regard. Ordwin reveals that Garen forfeited his noble title years ago after spending his entire fortune trying to save his sixth son. Reclaiming the title of Lord demands immense wealth alongside the solid backing of the townspeople. Calculating the requirements, Toven realizes he will need 10 million coins just to make a restoration viable. When Toven brings up the matter at home, Garen insists he is content with their humble lifestyle, yet Toven catches the unspoken depth behind his father's words. Meanwhile, Draven pays a visit to Orion's estate. Draven confronts Orion's father, Halvek, bluntly stating that his parenting methods are failing miserably. The instructor goes so far as to label Orion a failure directly to his face, aiming to spark some real effort. Draven urges the youth to stop blindly obeying Halvek and begin making his own decisions. For the very first time, Orion begins questioning whether his worldview has been entirely flawed. That evening, Toven lies awake, reflecting on his father's sacrifice. Having unraveled part of the past, Toven resolves to consult their maid, Sabet, for specific details while seeking guidance from his magic instructor, Marielle. Toven chooses to keep these discoveries hidden from his older brother Barak, withholding the troubling fact that an assassin once targeted Barak's life. The following morning, Toven walks to school alongside Farah, meeting Neris and Vereen along the path. Energetic Vereen continuously clings to Toven's arm, much to the annoyance of her quiet sister Neris. Upon stepping into the classroom, Toven senses an unusual change in the atmosphere. The arrogant noble Orion is surprisingly offering polite greetings to his classmates. Orion repeatedly glances toward Toven, hastily averting his eyes whenever Toven looks back. During lunch, Orion sits by himself chewing on a plain roll while the rest enjoy hearty meals. Toven finds it strange that a wealthy heir would settle for such a modest, solitary meal. Once classes finish, a physically gifted classmate named Branya asks Toven to guide her to the Adventurers Guild. Neris and Vereen wish to join, but Vereen's father harbors a deep grudge against Toven's household, forcing Vereen to decline and head straight home. Arriving at the guild, Toven introduces his companions to Sedwin, the front desk attendant. During their visit, the veteran adventurer Kyra arrives and nearly blabs that Toven can wield advanced flight magic. Toven interjects instantly, cutting her off before she exposes his capability. The companions take on a local quest to help an elderly couple paint their home. Toven uses the task to demonstrate to Branya how her immense strength can serve practical, everyday needs. Walking back, Toven senses a presence tracking them from the shadows, though he catches no sight of a pursuer. A few days later, Draven conducts a martial training session for the class. The instructor emphasizes that even aspiring scholars and healers must master basic self-defense against monsters, handing out specialized slime sticks for practice. These training weapons leave a thick, gooey residue on anyone struck during sparring. In the mock duels, Farah effortlessly disarms a formidable classmate named Renika without breaking a sweat. Next comes Toven's match against Orion, where Toven simply parries every blow to avoid inflicting harm. Growing frustrated by the impassable defense, Orion loses his temper and hurls familiar insults. Sticking strictly to his principles, Toven lowers his weapon and walks away, cutting off interaction with a bully. Surprisingly, Orion rushes after Toven and offers a public apology before the entire class. Orion confesses that Draven visited his home and called him out for failing to live up to his potential. Seeing Toven toil at the guild made Orion realize how misguided he was to look down on him. Admitting to his loneliness, Orion asks Toven for friendship, but Toven declines, sparking immediate anger from Orion. Demanding an explanation for the rejection, Orion lunges forward, and the pair end up wrestling in the dirt. Tears stream down Orion's face as he cries out against being cast aside without reason. Watching Orion weep strikes a chord in Toven, recalling bitter memories from his previous life as Yuto. Toven realizes Orion is merely a child, Completely oblivious to the dark deeds committed by his father Halvek. Softening his stance, Tovin agrees to explain the true cause of their divide, in private. Tovin heads to the school roof, preparing to confront Orion with the truth behind their family's feud. With classes out for the weekend, the rooftop stands completely empty for their meeting. Tovin skips the pleasantries and lays out the grim history between their houses. Garen, Tovin's father, was the rightful lord of the territory before losing everything. 2 years before either boy was born, Halvek secretly poisoned Tovin's elder brother. Halvek drained Garen's family fortune on medical costs until Garen surrendered his title. Wealth and nobility mean nothing to Tovin, but Tovin will never forgive the man who targeted his dying brother. Orion collapses to his knees, paralyzed by the revelation that his father committed such a crime. Tovin warns him that Halvek's downfall is coming, and Orion might get caught in the crossfire. To drive the point home, Tovin unleashes a staggering fireball that scorches the sky with raw power. Tovin tells him to pass the warning to Halvek. Retribution is coming. During dinner that evening, Orion carefully brings up the past to test his father. Halvek boasts about taking over the domain after the former lord stepped down, but the moment Orion brings up Garen's family, Halvek's eyes flash with fury. Halvek lets slip that he wouldn't have cared if Garen's sick son had died. Asked about Orion's missing mother, Halvek cold-heartedly admits he threw her out for disloyalty. Driven past his limit, Orion labels him a murderer, prompting Halvek to strike his son across the face. Sprawled on the floor, Orion realizes Tovin spoke the absolute truth. His father is a monster. Sensing his secrets slipping out, Halvek plans a meeting with a shadowy figure he calls the Teacher. Concealed on the roof during the earlier confrontation, Neris and Vereen overheard every word. Tovin's terrifying magic display left both sisters trembling, well aware no ordinary student possessed such strength. Neris and Vereen resolve to shadow Tovin and his brother closely to track their next move. The following morning, Tovin meets with his magic instructor, Marielle, and explains what happened on the roof. Rather than scolding him, Marielle vows to guard Tovin's family alongside Sabet, while Tovin focuses on his daily training regimen at the academy. Observing his progress, Marielle sees Tovin master fire spells effortlessly while struggling with water manipulation. Marielle cuts her own arm to demonstrate recovery magic, letting Tovin practice sealing the wound. Night falls, and Marielle catches 2 spies dispatched by Halvek to scope out Tovin's home. Marielle swiftly neutralizes the intruders by trapping them in a conjured pit. Recognizing Halvek's desperation, Marielle chooses to stay hidden in the shadows while keeping watch over the estate. Days later, Garen grants Tovin formal permission to venture out and hunt monsters. Tovin welcomes the news, knowing monster hunting will accelerate his income. At the guild hall, his classmates Renika and Branya wait for him, eager to practice real combat. So, Tovin leads them on a slime hunt, accompanied by the veteran adventurer Kyra. Out in the field, Tovin guides the team on refining their combat techniques. Tovin instructs Brandia to channel her strength into her legs for explosive leaps. Tovin tells Renika to moderate her brute force instead of smashing blindly. Renika strikes a slime with such force that it explodes in slime residue, though she beams with pride at her first kill. With the quest complete and their reward collected, the party returns to town. The following morning at school, Orion arrives with severe facial bruises. Orion claims he tripped, but Tovin knows instantly that Halvek struck him. Vereen whispers that she spotted Kalen tailing his father to a local clinic over the weekend, catching Tovin's attention. Tovin suspects the clinic holds secrets about the poison used against his brother years ago. Tovin resolves to investigate why the Lord visits the medical facility so frequently. Over the next few days, Tovin maintains a strict surveillance on the clinic. Tovin eventually slips inside under the guise of an exhausted patient and meets Dr. Varkos. Beneath Varkos's polite demeanor, Tovin catches a flash of malice in the doctor's expression. Mentioning that Garen used to be the Lord causes Varkos to smirk condescendingly. In that instant, Tovin realizes Varkos was the doctor who supplied Halvek with the poison years ago. Soon after, Halvek brings Orion to the clinic for a private meeting with Varkos. Unbeknownst to them, Tovin conceals himself on the roof, using stealth magic to eavesdrop as the truth comes out. Halvek was once nothing more than a servant in Garen's household. Halvek abused his access to poison Garen's infant son in his crib. Varkos displays a vial containing that very same poison, using it to intimidate Orion into silence. Tovin waits for them to depart, slips into the office, and secures the poison vial. With hard evidence in hand, Tovin heads back to the academy, while teachers grow uneasy over recent events. Orion's erratic behavior fuels growing rumors about Halvek's dark past. Draven reports the mounting evidence regarding Halvek directly to the academy director. Both leaders recognize Halvek's guilt, though taking down a sitting lord requires extreme discretion. They decided to wait for the upcoming harvest festival, knowing the king was scheduled to visit the town. With the monarch arriving, this was their best chance to settle matters once and for all. Toven headed straight to the guild to get the stolen vial examined. A professional appraiser activated an inspection skill to analyze the liquid. The test confirmed it was a lethal poison brewed by Halvek himself. To keep it secure, Toven divided the venom between 2 hidden bottles. Rather than stepping back and letting the adults handle everything, Toven resolved to present the evidence directly to the king during the festival. On the eve of the event, Toven met his teacher Marielle near his house. She had been silently guarding his family from Halvek's spies all along. Toven assured her that he was fully prepared to complete his task. Marielle warned him to stay sharp and promised to await his safe return. Carrying the poison and a clear strategy, Toven stood ready to restore his family's honor as the harvest festival began. Toven set out alongside his family and Farah, while Sabet and Marielle slipped away to carry out their secret assignment. Armed with the poison vial and a concealed dagger, Toven meant to end this conflict today. Navigating the crowded streets, they bumped into Renika, who was eager to see the royal family. As the king's carriage rolled past, Garen felt truly content with his quiet life as a farmer, despite his noble past. Toven soon offered a quick excuse and slipped away from his family. Joining Sabet and Marielle, Toven made his way toward the lord's estate. Orions met them at the gate and sneaked them inside, while the king scolded Halvek for mismanaging the territory. Orions formally presented Toven to the king and Prince Neldar. Delighted to meet another boy his age, the king invited Toven's group to join the royal feast. As the meal began, Toven noticed the unsettling Dr. Varkos behaving suspiciously. Activating his appraisal skill, Toven realized every dish on the table was laced with poison. Reacting instantly, Toven unleashed fire magic to shatter every plate before anyone could take a single bite. Halvek panicked as Varkos abandoned all pretense. The doctor openly confessed to helping Halvek attempt to murder Toven's brother years ago. Driven mad, Varkos lashed out with razor-sharp surgical tools, intent on slaughtering everyone in the room. Chaos erupted through the mansion as Marielle and the royal guards drew their weapons. Teacher Draven and the academy director suddenly burst into the hall to reinforce them. Varkos proved to be a formidable combatant, inflicting a severe wound on Orions during the clash. Reaching his fallen friend, Toven poured all his mana into healing magic to pull Orions back from the brink. Refusing to let his friend suffer the loss of a father, Toven even treated Halvek's injuries. The situation worsened when the nurse Senate seized the young sisters, taking Neris and Vereen hostage to cover Varkos' escape. Toven cast levitation and invisibility magic, quietly gliding through the air to catch the villains off guard. Ambushing the captors from above, Toven brought Varkos down with a massive fire spell. The blast ended the battle, though the strain knocked Toven unconscious until he woke in a hospital a week later, surrounded by his family. His father, Garen, sat by his bed, sternly emphasizing how deeply they loved him and how panicked they had been. Orions was making a steady recovery and shared that his mother had returned to care for him while Halvek remained jailed. As the sisters and Farah visited Toven, a long-awaited sense of peace finally returned to the household. With the traitors neutralized, the king set out to formally rebuild the town's governance. Dressed in a crisp new school uniform, Toven set off for the academy. Toven remembered how Marielle and Draven argued so loudly in the hospital room that the director threw them both out. On the walk to class, Toven told his brother and Farah that he wanted nothing more than a quiet life free from trouble. Upon reaching school, Toven was summoned to a private council with the king, the academy director, and the guildmaster, where the monarch warmly thanked him for preventing a catastrophe rather than scolding him for the ruin. The king added that Prince Neldar was now studying with fierce determination to match Toven's standard. With Halvek facing 5 years in prison, the king asked Garen to resume his former role as lord, though Garen worried over the financial burden. The guildmaster immediately relieved his concerns by announcing they had seized a massive fortune from the creepy doctor's safe. Backed by the townspeople's overwhelming support, Garen accepted the lordship. The king then extended an invitation for Toven to relocate to the royal capital, but Toven respectfully declined. Toven explained that he was still inexperienced and needed time to master his abilities safely. Toven reflected on his unique ability, insisting it was far from useless. It simply required 10 times the dedication and effort of an average skill. Impressed by such wisdom, the king agreed to wait until Toven turned 15. While back in the classroom, Orions revealed the whole story. Orions admitted that he and Tovin had secretly joined forces before the festival to expose his father's crimes. Tovin enjoys a quiet routine alongside his mother once again. At the house, the maid Sabet prepares to leave, consumed by guilt for spying on behalf of Halvak. Tovin's mother checks her with a sharp slap, reminding the girl that she belongs with them. Tears of relief streaming down her face, Sabet agrees to stay. And 2 weeks later, the Ardennes move back into the estate. Living in luxury feels unfamiliar, yet Tovin contentedly settles in. Class begins with the arrival of a new assistant teacher, Marielle. Dressed sharply with her hair and makeup styled by Tovin's mother, she presents a completely refined image. The students eagerly welcome her, though she immediately trades barbs with Draven as usual. Watching the familiar bickering, Tovin smiles, looking forward to peaceful days ahead. The class heads out to the practice field to hone their individual techniques. Farah drills a group of cats in combat tactics, while Draven guides Neris through gemstone manipulation. Eager to master his magic sword, Orion approaches Tovin for instruction. Fendril steps in, activating his collaboration skill to forge a magical link between them. Tovin channels flame magic through Fendril's conduit, causing Orion's blade to burst into bright fire. Though impressive, Tovin spots the flaw. Orion merely channels Tovin's power, rather than expanding his own magic. Annoyed, Orion snaps at Fendril for prioritizing his own skill growth over actual instruction. Taking a break, the female students gather around Marielle to ask about her background. She remains evasive, admitting only that she hails from a distant land with no living family nearby. Tovin wonders about her secrets, yet refrains from pressing, while his older brother works late into the night, poring over documents to prepare himself to govern the town. Seeing his brother embrace his duties brings relief to Tovin, who desires nothing more than a simple, unburdened existence. A few days later, Tovin spots Renika training tirelessly with the Weapons Club. Anticipation builds as the academy prepares to host a tournament against a rival school from Velmore. As Tovin looks on, Vereen, the older sister, quietly sneaks up beside him. She still acts awkwardly around him following the estate incident, keeping Tovin on guard as he learns that Renika secured a representative spot in the main competition, a monumental milestone for a first-year student, though shock sweeps the arena as the tournament opens. Despite their student status, the Velmore competitors possess towering frames like full-grown men. Their arrogant instructor, Malvin, claims they are simply gifted prodigies, masking the blatant use of ringers to intimidate younger opponents. Draven and Marielle fume at the scheme, yet official regulations prevent them from stopping the bouts. The matches turn brutal as the Velmore team relies on raw size and dirty tactics. Stepping into the arena for her turn, Renika faces off against a brute named Bregor. Spotting Renika's injured hand, Bregor abandons all sportsmanship and, instead of fighting cleanly, he repeatedly targets her damaged hand with deliberate cruelty. Even after Renika passes out and drops her sword, Bregor delivers a vicious kick to her unconscious body. Enraged by the display, Tovin vaults into the ring and drops Bregor with a surprise counter. Malvin leaps up, accusing Tovin of showing disrespect, but ignoring the instructor, Tovin challenges Bregor to a direct duel on the spot. Bregor activates a fortification skill to harden his body like stone, but Tovin's speed leaves him far behind. Tovin unleashes a relentless barrage, striking from every angle until Bregor reels in confusion. To finish the duel, Tovin summons a powerful water spell that sweeps Bregor across the ring in a soggy heap. Tovin's intervention turns the tide, securing overall victory for the academy alongside the senior students. As the teams depart, Malvin catches a clear glimpse of Marielle among the faculty. Recognizing her visage, he stares, though Marielle swiftly hides in the crowd to avoid detection. Upon returning to Velmore, Malvin reports directly to his king that a vital figure lies hidden at Tovin's academy, implying Marielle corresponds to a missing person from their royal history. Back at school, a recovered Renika draws immense motivation from Tovin's performance. She proposes forming a new guild club, where students undertake real monster hunts under teacher supervision. The idea receives unanimous backing, and the students vote Tovin as club leader. Even the overbearing sister Vereen joins the group to stay close to the team. Tovin realizes his peaceful life is slipping away under the new duties. Yet, seeing his friends work together brings him genuine satisfaction as the guild club sets off to hunt wild boars for a local farmer. On the trail, Tovin chats with Neris and learns why her sister acts so overprotective, discovering that Vereen cared for Neris through years of severe childhood illness. Summer break arrives soon after, scattering the students across the kingdom, with Orion heading to the capital to visit his imprisoned father. Tovin and his friends head over to visit Marielle at her home, but they arrive to find the residence completely trashed and Marielle gone. Tovin and Draven track her trail to a neighboring town, learning that royal knights hauled her off in a carriage hours earlier. Inspecting the scene, Tovin retrieves a gold earring that Draven had secretly purchased for her. The headmaster drops a bombshell. Marielle is actually the third princess of Velmore who fled 10 years ago. Furious and distressed, Draven resigns from the academy on the spot to go search for her. Garen grants permission for Tovin, his brother Beric, and their mother Alyssa to join Draven on the journey to Lutzel, as long as they stay out of trouble. En route, a strange barrel in their carriage begins rattling on its own. While in Lutzel, Marielle faces her father, the king. The king reveals they accidentally awakened an ancient dragon, which now demands a princess as sacrifice. Her stepmother urges Marielle to use her magical power alongside the knights to defeat the dragon, and Marielle agrees, but she strikes a bargain. If they win, the royal family must leave her alone forever so she can return to her simple academy life. Prying open the shaking barrel, Tobin discovers Farah and Renica crammed inside. Fendrel pops out of an adjacent equipment crate as well, having fallen asleep inside. The trio had snuck into the carriage to help save Marielle, drawing anger from Draven, though Alyssa convinces him to let them stay since they have already traveled far from home. Following 3 days of travel and fighting off monster attacks, the group finally crosses into the kingdom of Velmore. At a local inn, they hear alarming rumors of a dragon appearing in the mountains and demanding a royal princess. Draven panics, fearing Marielle will be offered as a sacrifice, until the innkeeper clarifies that the king is actually dispatching the squad to hunt the beast down. Hurrying straight to the castle, the party gains an audience with the king. He admits Marielle is his daughter and reveals she agreed to fight the dragon in exchange for her freedom. Draven sees the flaw in the plan, warning that this is no ordinary monster. It is a Calamity-class sealed dragon that requires an entire army to subdue, not a handful of knights. Terrified for Marielle's safety, Draven reveals his past identity as a legendary warrior and charges toward the mountains alone. Meanwhile, Marielle's half-sisters, Delphine and Rosalind, discover their mother secretly hopes Marielle dies in battle, prompting them to ride out to assist her. Tovin and his friends team up with the princesses and make for the royal armory. Everyone suits up, with Beric choosing a massive greatsword and Alyssa preparing her healing magic. Even Breger, the student Tovin previously beat, joins to help. But at the dragon's lair, the situation is grim. The dragon effortlessly overwhelms the royal knights with towering flames and sheer strength. Fixating on Marielle, the creature seems to recognize her, uttering a name from centuries past. Just as the dragon prepares to finish off the survivors, Draven arrives clad in full armor. Wielding a sword and spear, he pierces the dragon's magical barrier with crushing physical force. Stunned, the dragon mistakes Draven for someone from its ancient past as the clash intensifies, and the dragon launches Draven into the air, opening its jaws to swallow him. At that exact moment, Tovin casts levitation magic, saving Draven from the dragon's teeth just in time. Tovin rescues Draven barely in time, yet the atmosphere remains tense against the giant, terrifying dragon. Soon after, Farah, Fendrel, Renica, and the royal knights arrive as backup. Furious, the dragon Zaruk assumes the humans are bringing even more fighters to overwhelm him. Princesses Rosalind and Delphine step forward, asking why the dragon demanded a princess in the first place. Behind a boulder, they locate Marielle, hiding, safe and unharmed. Zaruk pauses in confusion, explaining he was looking for a girl named Ileana from the Kaskaran Empire. The group explains that the empire collapsed 500 years ago and is now the kingdom of Velmore. Zaruk is stunned to learn he has been sealed away for 5 full centuries. Realizing Marielle is not Ileana and Draven is not his past acquaintance, Zaruk falls into heartbreak and rage. With Garen gone, he resolves to obliterate the entire nation to vent his anger. He lashes out with his massive tail, sending knights flying as Draven tells Tovin to take Marielle and run. But Zaruk breathes a torrent of flame that blocks the exit, trapping everyone inside the crater. Draven tries his absolute best to fight, but the dragon's magic shield deflects every strike. Zaruk pins Draven to the ground, so Tovin casts a spell to distract him, only for Zaruk to hurl a massive fireball back. Just before the blast hits Tovin, Renica leaps in and deflects the fireball with her bare hands. Tovin quickly heals her scorched hands before Farah steps up, crying, yet filled with rage. Using her beast-taming ability, she screams at the dragon to stop hurting her friends. Surprisingly, Zaruk freezes on the spot, unable to move. The youths realize Zaruk's magic barrier only blocks attacks, not kindness. So Farah approaches and strokes his leg. She gently asks for his name, and he mournfully reveals it is Zaruk. Finjul uses his empathy skill so everyone can feel what Zaruk is feeling. Instantly, they all feel a hollow, crushing void of grief inside the dragon's heart. Zaruk explains that Ileana raised him from the time he was a tiny lizard. Once he grew too large for the castle, he went to live in the mountains. One day, he saw the sky turn red with war, and a man named Morvath sealed him away while weeping. The group realizes Morvath sealed Zaruk away to protect him from the war. Ileana likely perished during the war, and Morvath wanted to spare Zaruk from the carnage, so he put the dragon to sleep instead, while the students offer Zaruk their friendship so he will never be lonely again. Massive tears stream down Zaruk's snout as the dragon agrees to cease fighting. Zaruk offers his dragon blood to heal the wounded knights, instantly mending their injuries like magic. Inside the castle, a grim mood takes hold when King Aldemar finds Queen Marivel acting strangely strained. Her eyes glow purple as a sinister male voice echoes from her lips. A malevolent spirit has possessed the queen, plotting to slaughter the royal family and crush the kingdom. Queen Marivel fights off the entity long enough to lose consciousness, leaving King Aldemar terrified and bewildered. Minister Bayron arrives from the academy to render assistance at the palace. Meanwhile, the students soar toward the capital, mounted on Zaruk's back. Though magnificent, the violent beating of dragon wings leaves everyone dizzy from the motion. Landing safely, Zaruk settles down in the castle training grounds. King Aldemar and the royal court marvel that the students befriended a terrifying dragon. The court prepares a grand banquet in celebration, though Tovin senses that the ordeal surrounding the royal house has only just begun. While waiting for dinner on the grounds, Renika faces an aggressive knight picking a fight. This knight had belonged to the squad that cheated during the recent academy tournament. Vice Captain Danvar steps forward to resolve the dispute, just as a violent crash shatters the quiet inside the keep. Draven and the instructors hurry into Queen Marivel's quarters, finding total destruction. Queen Marivel is possessed by the spirit of Emperor Korgath, an ancient ruler from centuries past. Having severely injured Mariel, Korgath holds her hostage, demanding vengeance against the royal house for the downfall of his empire. Outside, chaos erupts as swarms of zombies and skeletons claw out of the dirt. The students fight bravely to hold the perimeter, but the undead continuously regenerate. Tovin realizes that exorcising a ghost requires Ivern's aid, drawing upon his companion's specialized spirit abilities. Zaruk flies Tovin, Renika, and Tovin's mother back toward their hometown at full speed. Mid-flight, Tovin unlocks a new spell called Auto Protection. Simply by observing Zaruk's magic, the protective barrier shields them from the punishing winds during flight. Landing in Gusttown and alarming the villagers with the massive beast, Tovin locates Ivern and explains the crisis. Despite the peril, Nevin's parents consent to his departure so he can assist his friends. Before they set out, Principal Marin joins the party to reinforce his faculty members. At the royal castle, the guards and High Priest Osric fight desperately against Korgath's dark magic. Queen Marivel detonates massive magical blasts, shattering the stone walls and trapping Draven and Varine in a corner, alongside the younger students, while Korgath readies a lethal fire spell to incinerate them. Just in time, Tobin and Zaruk smash straight through the stained glass window. Tobin kicks the possessed queen away to rescue Mariel, while Ivarn prepares his spiritual abilities to rip the Emperor's spirit out of Queen Marivel. Principal Marin arrives on scene, effortlessly blasting away the undead horde with gale force wind magic. While the instructors and Tovin's mother assist the victims, Tovin and Ivern confront the possessed queen. Tovin intercepts Korgath's fire attack with his own fireball, closing in to strike. Though Korgath possesses immense power, Queen Marivel's bulky royal gown restricts his movements. Ivarn grabs Queen Marivel's arm, channeling spirit power to draw the entity forth. A grotesque, spectral face emerges from Queen Marivel's form, the ancient Emperor Korgath. Probing the spirit's core, Ivern senses a soul consumed entirely by hatred and malice. Tovin executes Finjal's technique to aid Ivarn, glimpsing a fleeting vision of Princess Ileana in a barren wasteland. Enraged that Tovin witnessed his past, Korgath attempts to throttle him, but Tovin refuses to loosen his hold. King Aldemar and Priest Osric join the struggle. King Aldemar pleads with Queen Marivel to awaken, confessing his enduring devotion to her. Queen Marivel's spirit revives within, assisting from inside to expel Korgath for good. Priest Osric attempts to banish the specter with sacred prayers, but Korgath stubbornly resists. Knocking Priest Osric aside, Korgath lunges toward Tovin to possess his body instead. Just before Korgath reaches Tovin, Draven and Varine step into harm's way. Their voices resonate with otherworldly power, as Nevin enables the spirits of Paladin Tiger and Princess Ileana to possess their bodies. They inform Korgath that his reign ended centuries ago, urging him to release his lingering malice. Princess Ileana reassures her father that she harbors no resentment for her death, wishing only for peace. Calming at last, Korgath imparts final wisdom about family to King Aldemar before he dissolves into light, causing all the zombies and skeletons outside to crumble to dust. Before departing, the souls of Ileana and Paladin Tiger share a farewell kiss through the instructors' bodies. The students watch in stunned embarrassment as the spirits depart and the teachers regain consciousness. Mariel collapses from sheer embarrassment as reality sinks in, while cleanup efforts begin across the kingdom the following morning. An uncomfortable tension settles between Draven and Mariel as they struggle to interact naturally. Over breakfast, Draven catches the entire table off guard by formally requesting King Aldemar's blessing to marry Mariel. The king readily grants permission, on the single condition that the couple promises frequent visits to the palace. Even the dishonest knights who cheated during the tournament approach Renika and Tovin to offer sincere apologies. They swear to throw themselves into training and fight with honor from here on out. As the group prepares to depart, Zarek the Dragon announces his desire to live alongside Tovin and his family. Unable to squeeze his massive body inside a house, Zaruk shrinks himself down to the size of a lapdog before everyone boards the carriage home. Along the journey, Tovin questions Draven about his past and how he earned the title of War Demon, learning that his ability lets him master any weapon instantly. Yet that extraordinary power burdens him with heavy scars from a brutal history on the battlefield. Opening up about his youth, Draven reveals that his innate gift made him an unstoppable weapon master by the age of 5. By 15, he was already famous as the feared War Demon, though the endless bloodshed crushed his spirit. Watching innocent families suffer through the atrocities of war broke something deep within him. Returning to his birth village offered no comfort, as he found only charred ruins and ashes remaining. Stepping into teaching gave him purpose, allowing him to protect children from being weaponized the way he once was. Confessing that Mariel mirrors a girl he failed to save years ago, he reassures everyone that his feelings for her are genuine. His confession leaves the students weeping, prompting Principal Marin to step forward and tear up Draven's resignation letter. The Academy officially retains both Draven and Mariel on the faculty staff. Back at the castle, the envoys from the Reflection Kingdom wrap up their diplomatic affairs. Declining gold or jewels, they ask King Aldemar for a formal pledge of military support instead. Fearing that the Thornreach Kingdom quietly prepares for war, they secure strong allies ahead of the storm. Arriving back home, the group finds their family reunions chaotic and overwhelming. Finjal's parents scold him severely for running away, yet hold him close in relief. Renika's parents react with dramatic tears and tease her about marrying Tovin in the future. Overwhelmed by the teasing, Renika bolts away in red-faced embarrassment right before a severe flu sweeps through the whole squad. Sick in bed for the rest of break, the friends fight off the fever. Fortunately, everyone pulls through and recovers right in time for the opening day of term. Walking toward class, Tovin notices his older brother Barrick fidgeting nervously. Barrick fears that Tovin harbors secret resentment toward him over his romance with Farah. Reassuring his brother, Tovin explains that he views Farah purely as a sister and supports them wholeheartedly. Later, the squad arranges to gather after school to visit Zaruk. Eager to show off his grand form once more, Zaruk promises the kids valuable treasures from his personal hoard. Excited to inspect the legendary beast's gifts, everyone marches straight toward Mariel's house. Presenting his gifts, Zaruk distributes his own shed dragon scales and sharp teeth to the children. Thrilled by the rare materials, the group eagerly plans custom weapons, from heavy axes to armored gauntlets. Tensions flare at dinner when Barrick suddenly storms out into the garden in a rage, leaving Tovin to follow and find him weep. Pouring out his heart, Barrick admits feeling completely overshadowed by Tovin's endless praise and achievements. Envying his brother so deeply that he worries Farah prefers Tovin, Barrick throws a punch, igniting a wild brawl. Trading blows until their frustration burns out, the brothers finally talk through their grievances and reconcile. At school the next morning, Tovin asks Farah to tone down her physical affection out of respect for Barrick. Farah stuns the group by declaring she wanted to marry both brothers, until her friends clarify that she can only choose one. She ultimately chooses Barrick, appreciating that he remains consistently by her side. With the relationship drama resolved, the class begins grueling preparations for the school festival's combat and racing challenges. While the events include unique trials like a shopping sprint, Tovin enters every single fighting bracket. Training at the guild, Tovin faces harsh mockery from a belligerent adventurer named Grosk, who ridicules his abilities. Though Draven steps in angrily to defend his pupil, Tovin remains composed and unfazed. Eager to prove his progress, Tovin requests a formal duel against Draven in front of the gathering crowd. Tovin lunges at Draven, testing his martial limits against a battle-tested master. Moving with blinding speed, Draven strikes repeatedly before Toven can even raise a guard. Realizing a conventional victory is impossible, Toven commits to a dangerous gamble. Intentionally taking Draven's blade through his arm, Toven secures the opening needed to land a solid strike across his teacher's chest. His tactic succeeds, but intense shock knocks Toven unconscious, leaving him to awaken with a severely battered arm. With his arm swollen and bruised without a guild healer nearby, his companions treat the injury using basic ice and poultices. While Toven rests, the arrogant Grosk resumes his loud boasting to the crowd. Mocking Toven's fighting style, Grosk claims superiority over Draven by bragging about slaying 30 trolls. Smirking at the insult, Draven casually mentions wiping out 5,000 soldiers during a single campaign. Before Grosk can process the claim, Draven moves like lightning and knocks him cold with a single hit. Later on, Zaruk arrives at the academy grounds accompanied by Sabet, the family's housemate. Growing restless at home, the dragon dropped by simply to check in on the kids. Spotting Sabet for the first time, Guildmaster Ordwin finds himself instantly smitten. Toven notices and helps Ordwin work up the nerve to ask Sabet out. To everyone's surprise, Sabet agrees to go on a date the next day. Before calling it a night, Toven demonstrates his Draco Flame magic to Grosk. The resulting blast terrifies Grosk so badly that he faints on the spot. The following morning, Toven tries to skip school to spy on Sabet's date, but his mother catches him and sends him off to class. At school, Marielle thoroughly scolds Draven for injuring Toven during their sparring match. At lunchtime, Toven discovers Zaruk hiding in his bag, having devoured his entire meal. Pitying his empty stomach, Toven's friends happily share their food with him. Later that afternoon, a quiet classmate named Astrid asks Toven to help refine her dance magic. Toven, Astrid, and Jorik head to the main hall to rehearse for the upcoming festival. Astrid runs through her routine, though Toven notices she lacks genuine joy. She admits her mother forces her to perform traditional dance, even though she longs to be an idol. Toven encourages her to incorporate energetic cheer and idol moves into her act. To keep the new routine secret, they agree to practice at Toven's house, running into Sabet on their way back. Sabet has just finished her date with Ordwin, yet she appears deeply troubled. She feels unworthy of happiness after remaining silent about the former lord's atrocities years ago. Toven reassures her that the past is behind them and that she deserves happiness like a sister to him. Relieved, Sabet flashes a genuine smile, letting Toven spend his break teaching Astrid choreography and songs. The training gets awkward when Toven's friends catch them mid-routine and burst into laughter. Yet they complete the dance just as Toven's arm fully heals for the festival. Serving as event announcers, teachers Valara and Marielle take the stage. Valara begins gossiping about Marielle's secret romance with Draven, prompting Marielle to deliver a quick gut punch to keep the broadcast professional. The festival opens with a bread-eating race, where bakery-obsessed Renica dashes to an easy victory. Orion wins his own heat, only to suffer through a carrot filling he utterly despises. Attention turns to the combat tournament, where all magic is strictly prohibited. Securing a bye in the opening round, Class A watches the matches from the bleachers. The crowd watches hammer-wielder Bardek clash with spearman Ulvar. Bardek slams the arena floor to send shockwaves, but Ulvar leaps high into the air to stay safe. Ulvar outmaneuvers Bardek, shoving him out of the ring to claim the match. Taking careful notes on every technique, Toven and his allies prepare for their turn to fight. Class A finally steps onto the platform to challenge Class C. Orion opens the duel against a tough opponent named Mikon. Mikon activates a skin-hardening ability to withstand Orion's fiery blade, yet Orion remains composed, overpowering Nikon to drive him out of bounds. Up next, Branya triggers her strength skill, blasting her opponent Torm clear out of the ring with one blow. Renika dominates the third bout with equal ease, securing a clean sweep for Class A. Toven steps into the square for the following round against Class C's Marnie. Marnie attempts an ambush by using agricultural magic to turn the ground into treacherous mud, hoping Toven trips. Toven proves far too swift, executing an unorthodox sword technique taught by teacher Draven. He shifts his blade to his offhand at the final moment, striking Marnie from an unexpected angle. Toven secures the win, filling Draven with pride as his pupil demonstrates his signature style. Fendrel squares off against his childhood rival Barlin, who adopts a defensive shell to drain Fendrel's stamina, only for Fendrel to activate a siphon power that steals Barlin's own stamina boost. Fendrel unleashes a rapid flurry of punches to close out another victory. Intimidated by Class A's dominance, Class C forfeits their remaining bouts to conserve strength, leaving Class A in sole possession of first place for the martial event. During the target contest, Vareen and Evarn combine throwing knives and boomerangs to pop moving slime targets. A Class E marksman takes top honors with flawless accuracy, while Neris and Evarn execute sharp teamwork to claim third place. In the appraisal event, Astrid and Wilkin search the grounds to locate hidden artifacts. Astrid retrieves a chest submerged in a pond, only for a Class D competitor to swipe it from her. She casts the binding spell to trap the thief and reclaim the chest, but right at the very last second, a rival girl named Ravella sweeps in to snatch it away. Astrid finishes in second place, still earning solid points for the team. Now Class A pins their hopes on Farah to win the upcoming equestrian race. Farah trots back to her group, beaming after riding away with an effortless victory. Using her beast bonding skill on her steed Ambler, she crosses the finish line far ahead of the competition. Little Zarek watches eagerly from the sidelines, until Tobin's mother carries him back to the stands so officials can work. Branny and Findrel step up to anchor Class A for the tug-of-war competition. Class B sent out a student named Dorlin, who triggered a buff skill to boost his strength and stamina. But Branya's raw physical power completely outmatched him, and with Fendrel stepping in to assist, after dragging the opposing team over the line for another top finish, the event shifted to the math competition. Tovin's older brother, Barrick, swept the senior division without breaking a sweat. When the first-year bracket opened, Wilkin matched up against a Class D girl named Lena. Zafine moved with astonishing speed, tearing through every problem in under 5 minutes. She insisted her performance came purely from natural talent rather than any skill. That blistering pace rattled Wilkin, dragging Class A down to a last-place finish. Tobin spent the lunch break lifting Wilkin's spirits before heading over to meet his family. The gathering grew into a full family reunion, with the parents of Renika, Branya, and Neris. The adults immediately started teasing Tovin about marrying one of their daughters, pointing out his talent and noble blood. Neris's father, Dalmar, had one too many drinks, and openly pressed Tovin to take his daughter as a bride. Searching for the girls later, Tovin found them chatting with Corbin, a tall businessman partnered with Dalmar. Corbin had sought out Tovin specifically, eager to meet the young noble whose magic reputation preceded him. Following a short conversation, everyone returned to the arena for the afternoon's magic tournament. The rules strictly prohibited physical strikes, requiring fighters to hit a designated patch on their opponent's clothes with magic or force them out of bounds. Over in the senior division, Neris' sister Vareen faced an opponent who foolishly tried flirting with her mid-match. She shut him down instantly, blasting him out of the ring with a combination of earth and water spells. Barrick secured his victory just as fast, hurling a massive gust of wind that blew his opponent right off the stage. Next up were Class A's first years against Class B, starting with Farah against a girl named Petra. Petra proved unexpectedly skilled with earth magic, raising stone walls to block Farah's fire magic. Remaining calm, Farah drove her back with controlled flames until Petra was cornered. With her opponent trapped, Farah unleashed a wind spell that knocked Petra straight out of bounds. Fresh off Farah's win, Wilkin stepped into the ring, determined to make up for his earlier math loss. In the next match, Jorik took his position against Krug from Class B. Krug was massive and used a shadow skill to instantly warp right behind Wilkin. Realizing Krug's actual spell output was quite weak, Wilkin quickly crafted a counterplay. He baited Krug toward the arena edge before unleashing a torrent of water. Krug warped to dodge the stream, only to land outside the ring and hand Wilkin a tactical victory. Orion dropped his round due to his weak magical abilities, but Tovin wrapped up his match in seconds, summoning a powerful gale that launched his rival out of the ring. Moving into the next round against Class C, both Tovin and Farah claimed effortless victories. Tovin quickly realized Class C was intentionally throwing matches to save their top fighters for later. Matched against a skilled mage named Mavra, Astrid found herself facing a strategy designed purely to drain her mana. Wanting to preserve her energy for upcoming events, Tobin advised Astrid to forfeit the match. Instead, Astrid ended it instantly by throwing a direct punch, which was blatantly against the tournament rules, intentionally taking a disqualification. Wilkin and Orion followed suit to conserve their strength, leaving Class A with second place before the obstacle race. Annika activated her ghost-talking skill, directing spirits to grab the legs of competing runners. As rivals stumbled and collapsed around her, Annika strolled across the finish line for an easy victory. Findrel grew overly confident and mismanaged his skill, slumping into last place. Tournament officials then announced the Monster Identification Challenge. The supervising instructor accidentally blurted out the first answer and was fired on the spot. As the event progressed, rival classes formed an alliance to shut out Class A from scoring points. Overwhelmed by coordinated sabotage, Wilkin and Annika struggled to log correct answers, leaving Class A stranded at the bottom of the scoreboard before the final event, the dance competition. A Class C student delivered an elegant traditional dance, but Astrid and Renika completely flipped the energy. They stormed the stage in colorful idol outfits designed by Tovin, launching into a high-energy performance. The audience erupted as the upbeat music and vibrant choreography took over the arena. Flawless scores from the judges propelled Class A right back into first place overall. Once the performance ended, the businessman Corbin approached Sabet to inquire about the costume designs. Sabet revealed that the entire visual concept originated from Tovin. Corbin found himself thoroughly intrigued, recognizing Tovin's sharp mind. It surprised him given how widely Tovin's skill was dismissed as useless. He began viewing Tovin as a far more promising business partner than the other nobles. Back at the field, a sudden chill struck Tovin just as officials announced the Princess Carry race. Class A selected Branya to be carried, leveraging her position as the lightest student in their roster. Though Renika and Astrid felt a touch of envy, they agreed it was their best strategy for victory. Instructors clarified that the race simulated rescuing an injured comrade from danger, meaning magic was completely forbidden as Tovin scooped up Branya and sprinted forward. But rival classes form a desperate alliance with a single goal: bring down Class A. Runners from Class C and D swarm Tovin, clawing at Branya to rip her from his arms. Tovin struggles to keep his footing as the endless assaults throw him off balance. While the mob focuses entirely on pinning Tovin down, a Class E runner slips past the chaos unnoticed to snatch first place. But the sabotage is far from over. A cluster of opponents sweeps Tovin's legs, sending him crashing down and spilling Branya to the dirt. Disqualified for dropping his partner, Class A takes a 0, leaving Tovin boiling with rage. Not at his rivals, but at himself for letting pride blind him to the danger. Tovin slams his fist into the stone, sending a shockwave ripple through the arena floor. Watching the cracked ground, the surrounding students pale in sudden terror. The rivals realize with horror just how monstrous Tovin's strength truly is. Shaken, the rival class leaders gather in secret to tear up their pact. Dread consumes them, fearing that pushing Tovin any further will make him completely snap and butcher them in the arena combat. Abandoning the ambush, the leaders agree to strictly fight for their own scores. Inside the Class A staging area, his teammates rally around Tovin to lift his spirits. The upcoming event tests packing efficiency, forcing contenders to haul baskets loaded with provisions and gear. Farah takes the field first for Class A, efficiently stacking cuts of meat and fish until saboteurs sneak giant crabs and heavy watermelons into her load the second her back is turned. The sabotage ruins her tally, dropping Class A to third. But Neris steps up for round 2. Quick-witted and agile, Neris anticipates their dirty tactics. With pinpoint accuracy, she swats incoming trash out of the air using spoons and forks. To lock down victory, Neris sweeps every high-value item off the racks to starve her opponents. As the final second ticks down, she discards the low-tier loot to keep only the single highest-value prize. She claims top marks, setting the stage for the final pre-combat challenge, a credit valuation test. Contenders must select a combination of goods totaling exactly 10,000 credits. Fendril enters first, carefully calculating his choices under fierce pressure. A fourth-place finish shrinks Class A's overall lead to a razor-thin margin. Stepping up for her second run, Neris doubles down on her aggressive strategy. She strips the tables bare to starve the competition, drawing scoffs from rivals who think she failed. But at the buzzer, she discards the entire pile, retaining only a tarnished staff and a modest bracelet. Her valuation hits 9,999 credits, striking near perfection for another dominant win. Fendril reveals the entire act was a calculated feint to trick rival classes into lowering their guard. The triumph restores Class A to top standing as tournament combat approaches. Realizing they cannot overtake Class A legitimately, Class C plots to force a 0-point streak. Driven by envy toward Tovin, Mikkel prepares contraband sleep powder while Class D lingers in dead last. Class D's top ace, Zafine, seeks to corner Tovin and pry out his secrets. Class B opts for total avoidance to survive, while Class E falls into complete disarray after their instructor, Valara, is caught trying to dodge her punishment again. The grand finale kicks off as a one-on-one elimination tournament, pitting Class A directly against Class C. Orion steps into the ring against Mikkel, who tries to rattle him with taunts about his disgraced house, but Orion tunes out the noise, swinging a massive wooden broadsword to shatter Mikkel's guard. Mikkel attempts to flick hidden sleep powder, but Tovin's sharp shout warns Orion just in time. Orion flattens Mikkel with a final strike before collapsing asleep, claiming victory for Class A. Toven steps up next against Valken, who hurls his blade as a distraction to close in with bare fists. But Toven keeps his cool, carving distance with short fire bursts before pinning Valken to the mat. Conceding defeat, Valken surrenders, leaving Branya to face off against Hergen. Hergen tries psychological warfare, mocking her monstrous strength as unappealing to men. Though tears well up, her fury erupts, driving her to spear Hergen clean out of the ring. Because both fighters hit the floor beyond the boundary simultaneously, the match ends in a draw. Wrapping up the round, Ivarn conjures a wraith and an undead warrior. Terrified by the spectral summons, his opponent faints on the spot. In the stands, Renika passes out from sheer horror of spirits. Yet, Class A locks in the overall victory against Class C. As the second round opens, Zafine of Class D calls out Toven directly. She demands his hand in marriage should she win, inciting instant rage from Renika and Branya. Winning a quick rock-paper-scissors toss, Renika earns the right to punish the challenger, stepping into the ring as Renika attacks with relentless aggression, determined to shut down the outrageous marriage wager. Nimble and elusive, Zafine weaves through attacks while tossing disorienting alchemical vials. She unleashes a potent paralytic haze, locking Renika's limbs in place. Lena tries to drag the helpless opponent out of the ring, but Renika forces her way through the paralysis by sheer force of will. She slams Zafine with a heavy blow, sending her crashing out of bounds. Class A takes the round, and Toven carries the exhausted Renika back to the rest tent. Later on, Zafine brings Toven medicine to help his team recover. The potion restores Renika and rouses Orion, who was still unconscious from his previous duel. Despite her defeat, Zafine admits her feelings for Toven remain unchanged and vows not to give up. Against Class E in the next round, victory comes easily since the opposing team is already drained. Toven unveils a fresh technique to end his match in seconds, while Ivarn uses his skeleton summons to completely outmaneuver his opponent. Class A breezes through the rest of the bracket without breaking a sweat. The final matches kick off with Orion facing Sorsha, his childhood neighbor. Sorsha holds a grudge because Orion forgot a promise he made to her years ago. Sparks fly as fire and ice magic clash across the arena. Mid-fight, the two stumble into an awkward collision, leaving Sorka blushing furiously. Orion soon unleashes a gale spell to sweep her out of the ring. Resolving their differences afterward, Sorsha confesses she has harbored feelings for him all along. Branya secures her own win by hurling a spearman who tried to keep her at bay. In the final bout, Toven steps into the ring against Odric. Odric harbors bitter resentment over Toven's popularity with the girls. He hurls every attack he has, yet Toven stands completely unfazed. Combining fire and water spells, Toven blasts Odric clean off the arena stage. With that decisive victory, Class A claims the overall tournament title. Taking the stage, the headmaster speaks on how competition prepares students for real-world battles. He points out that while some resorted to sabotage, Class A triumphed through genuine skill and fair play. Cheers erupt across the field as the tournament officially draws to a close. The headmaster gathers the assembly for the final standings. Two instructors unroll a massive scroll, revealing Class A in first place with 66 points. Orion, Fendril, and the rest of the boys leap into the air, celebrating. A wave of satisfaction hits Toven, remembering how in his past life, he was consistently denied recognition for his achievements. Class B finishes in second place, Class E takes third, and Class D claims fourth. That leaves Class C, led by the scheming Mikkel, stuck in dead last. Stunned by the result, Michael furiously demands an explanation for their dismal score. The headmaster clarifies that while the rulebook did not explicitly forbid underhanded tactics, he deducted points for hazardous tricks like sleeping powder. He delivers a stern lesson on how honor and integrity matter far more than cheap wins. Turning to Mikkel, he notes that channeling his cunning into supporting others would make him a true leader. Class C lost 15 points for foul play, while Class D was docked 10. Over in the senior division, Toven's brother Barrick captured first place, sealing a double triumph for their house. For their prize, Class A receives custom white jackets detailed with gold embroidery. Enchanted warding magic keeps the fabric spotless no matter the grime. The students eagerly slip them on, united as a true team. As the crowd disperses after the ceremony, Toven's group reunites with their families, exhausted and famished. To give Farah a rest, Toven lets his small dragon Zaruk perch atop his head. Toven's mother announces a grand victory feast at their estate for all of Class A and their families. Even the merchant Corbin and Orion's mother Coril join the party. Near the academy gates, Toven catches sight of Mikkel looking completely crestfallen. His sister Junia stands beside him, trying her best to offer comfort. Toven's father explains that Mikkel faces a bitter household life, where he is mistreated by his family. Toven approaches to speak with him. Mikkel snaps and throws a punch, but Tovin doesn't even flinch. Tovin tells Mikkel he knows the pain of feeling unwanted, urging him never to abandon hope. Heartened by the conversation, Mikkel promises to challenge Tovin fairly next time. Right on cue, Kyra the adventurer bursts into view, fleeing two relentless suitors, Audric, whom Tovin just defeated, and her childhood friend Grosk. Both tried asking her out simultaneously, but Kyra turns them down flat and sprints away from the chaos. Back at the estate, the celebration reaches full swing, with teachers Draven and Marielle joining the festivities. The eccentric instructor Valara attempts to sneak inside disguised as a maid, but her own students spot her and drag her off to punish her antics. Plates of steak, rich stew, and fresh bread cover the table for an incredible feast. Laughter fills the room as everyone enjoys the meal together. Mid-dinner, Corbin the merchant calls Tovin over for a private word. Corbin admires the dance outfits the girls wore and proposes a business deal to produce the designs. The group jokes about staying behind just to watch the newborn grow up. Baby Winla stirs awake and bursts into tears, sensing her brothers are about to depart. Her tears vanish into giggles the moment she spots massive Zarok standing fearlessly beside them. Shared farewells finish, and the group secures themselves inside the huge basket strapped to Zaruk. Zaruk launches into the night sky, flying straight toward the Ostvale Kingdom. Their hour-long journey glides over a stunning, sprawling lake below. Draven notes that aerial border crossing is effortless, since guards only monitor the ground routes. The dragon touches down on a mountain ridge overlooking Inabel, where Zaruk shrinks back into his small lizard form to avoid drawing attention. Descending the slope, Farah tumbles and scrapes her hand, but Vereen mends the injury with healing magic. Watching Vereen closely, Tovin senses her quiet struggle with self-doubt. She feels overshadowed by her sister's talents, but they soon arrive in town and secure an inn room. Mentioning their search for the local blacksmith at the front desk, the innkeeper's face drops, warning that visiting him is a mistake. Yet the party seeks out the forge at dawn. The workshop stands completely silent and cold, showing no signs of active work. Inside, they come across the blacksmith, an unkempt craftsman named Halvard. Halvard inherited the shop from his late father, the legendary master Wystan. Business is dried up, Halvard admits, because locals dismiss his talents as inferior to his father's. Bitter adventurers even dragged his name through the mud after he refused to craft cheap, flimsy gear. Draven inspects Halvard's creations and confirms his metallurgy nearly matches the old master's standard. Halvard's eyes light up with pure excitement at the sight of the dragon parts they brought him. The smith offers a 50% discount if he can display the completed armor to the king and townspeople first. Working legendary dragonhide will silence his doubters and restore honor to his forge. Accepting his terms, the team spends the following days assisting around the workshop. Zaruk even donates a fragment of his own claw to craft a warding amulet for baby Winla. As work continues at the anvil, dark forces gather back in their home village. Suspicious adventurers idling near the family shop lock their eyes on Vereen's sister, Neris. Her passive Jewel Master ability stuns the thugs as it enables her to evaluate raw gemstones in a heartbeat, prompting the men to plan an abduction. They scheme to exploit her rare talent or sell her off for an immense payout. Oblivious to the threat back home, Tovin and his companions collect their fresh equipment and head back. Reaching the house, Tovin receives a warm, joyful welcome from little Winla. Once Draven departs, Tovin insists on escorting Vereen home due to rumors of criminals lurking nearby. Along the path, Vereen confesses her old jealousy toward Neris and voices her desire to shield her now. Vereen sincerely apologizes for her past childish actions and outbursts. The next morning at school, Tovin offers loans to his classmates so everyone can purchase Halvard's gear. Elsewhere, a gang of rogues under Skoll's command prepares to capture Fine. They knew he had a special gift for detecting precious gems and intended to profit off it. As classes end, teacher Valara offers to accompany young Neris back to her house. Skoll's men stage a loud altercation in the street to distract the instructor. While Valara steps in to break up the fight, thugs snatch Neris, shove her into a sack, and speed away in a wagon. Valara attempts to blast the carriage with spells, but a heavy strike knocks her off her feet. Recovering quickly, the teacher sprints straight to Neris's family to raise the alarm. Hearing that her younger sister was abducted, Vereen bolts out the door without waiting for backup. Channeling her speed magic, Vereen pursues the carriage tracks for miles across the countryside. Pushing through sheer exhaustion, she finally locates the kidnapper's hidden camp in the forest. Taking advantage of a distraction, Vereen slips inside the carriage and finds Fine inside. Knowing she cannot carry her sister away undetected, Vereen makes a daring split-second decision. She shears her hair short to match her sister's look and swaps clothes with her. Hiding her unconscious sister safely in the brush, Vareen draws the thugs' attention and surrenders. Believing they still hold their original captive, the bandits knock Vareen out and resume their trek. Word of the kidnapping reaches Toven and his friends, leaving them horrified and ready to act. Zarek urges Toven onto his back, and the dragon rockets up into the clouds. En route, they gather Draven, Valara, and the headmaster to join the rescue mission. Seething with anger, Valara prepares for battle, having secretly tagged one kidnapper with a tracking mark. Meanwhile, the bandits reach the rendezvous point to transfer their prisoner to 3 hooded figures. The employers realized right away that the thugs had blundered, capturing the older sister, Vareen, instead of Neris. The hooded leader barely blinked, handing over a meager reward alongside a bottle of strength potion. He warned them they would need the extra power, as unwanted guests were already on their way. Before the hooded figures vanished into thin air, Zaruk descended from above with the rest of the party. Toven caught sight of Neris dodging wild wolves in the thicket and plummeted to assist her. Working together, Toven and the headmaster dispatched the wild beasts in seconds. Neris emerged unscathed, but thoroughly baffled, draped in her sister Vareen's oversized clothes. The group quickly pieced together that Vareen had traded places to shield her younger sister. Wasting no time, they urged Zarek to trail the kidnapper's fleeing carriage from above. Toven dropped onto the roof, sliced through the wood, and pulled Vareen from inside. The abductors, under the command of a brute named Skull, gaped in sheer disbelief. Toven blew the carriage apart with a fire burst and shattered Skull's wrist in a swift exchange. The instructors and headmasters swept in next, wiping out the remaining thugs. Teacher Valara fought like a demon, battering one bandit with iron spheres out of sheer fury over the kidnapping. Outmatched, Skull uncorked a strange elixir. Muscle surged beneath his skin as he expanded into a massive green ogre. His shattered wrist snapped back into place, boosting his speed and strength tenfold. As Toven clashed with the beast, notes from a mysterious flute echoed through the trees, driving the monster wild. When the creature pinned Rinika and lashed out, something inside Toven snapped. Unleashing a massive dragon-shaped beam of radiant light, Toven vaporized Skull where he stood. The surrounding companions swiftly finished off the rest of the mercenaries. Right as the headmaster stepped forward to secure the last survivor, a dark spear pierced the captive's chest. Within seconds, the slain bandits melted into bone, leaving not a single trace behind. An eerie voice taunted them from the canopy, claiming this had all been a test of Toven's growth before fading away. On their return journey, Lena intercepted them with medicinal drafts to revive Vareen and Rinika. They reached the safety of town, where the two sisters embraced in tears. Yet Toven remained on edge. Toven knew powerful masterminds were behind this, using dangerous alchemy to turn humans into monsters. Toven swore to push his training even further to meet whatever threat loomed ahead. Zarek suggested shrinking his dragon form before entering the town to avoid a scene, landing near the gates, and, since Zarek was already famous for living alongside Toven, the locals didn't panic. Toven spotted Neris and confirmed her safety with the guards before leading everyone toward the Brennick workshop. Vareen, having regained her composure, walked hand in hand alongside her sister Nerys. Sensing a lingering tremor in Vareen's step, Toven quietly asked if she was holding up all right. Vareen offered a soft smile, thanking him for the rescue, and recognizing his impulse to protect his friends. Warm light still spilled through the shop windows when the group finally arrived. Their parents, Dalmar and Isella, bolted out the front door to embrace them. Without warning, Dalmar delivered a stinging slap across Vareen's cheek. Dalmar was furious that she had rushed off alone without calling for backup. Tears spilled over as Vareen voiced her hidden grief, crying that her parents only favored Neris for her special talent. Ysella wrapped her daughter in a tight embrace, weeping as she begged forgiveness for causing such pain. Dalmar joined the embrace, assuring Vareen that she was cherished beyond measure and irreplaceable. Watching the tearful reconciliation, Toven and his companions quietly slipped back to give the family privacy. Given the late hour and everyone's exhaustion, the party postponed their visit to the blacksmith. The entire party retreated to Toven's home to rest for the night. Rinika had offered invaluable help during the rescue, and Toven took a moment to thank her. When Rinika confessed her feelings for him, tears unexpectedly welled up in Toven's eyes. Not out of sorrow, but from profound joy at having genuine companions who cared for him, something he never knew in his former life. After sharing a hearty dinner together, everyone collapsed into a deep sleep. Over the following week, the Academy launched a full inquiry into the monster-transforming potions. Though the mastermind evaded capture, the school issued realm-wide warnings regarding the dangerous concoctions. Grateful for his daughter's return, Dalmar handed the young heroes a generous reward in gold. This extra cash provided the exact capital required to pay for their dragon-scale gear. With matters settled, the party set off, accompanied now by Tovin's brother Barrick and teacher Draven. Soaring back toward the Ostvale kingdom atop Zarok, they arrived at Halvard's forge to find the place packed. Since the king had praised the dragon gear Halvard crafted, wealthy clients flooded the shop. Despite the crushing backlog, Halvard set everything aside to prioritize the youths. Midway through the visit, Ivarn channeled his spirit magic to summon the ghost of Halvard's father, Wiston. The spectral father observed Halvard's craft and declared that his son's skill had surpassed his own. Overwhelmed with pride, Halvard flatly refused to accept a single coin from the group. He completed all their legendary weapons and gear for free as a token of gratitude for restoring his pride. Time skipped forward until Tovin turned 15, the age when students formally graduated from the academy. Tovin looked back on his academy years, remembering the grueling fights, the training, and the chaos of the kidnapping incident. His older brother Barrick had graduated 2 years prior. Their little sister Winla was now an energetic 5-year-old who adored playing with Zarok. Farah was officially moving into the family home as well, preparing to marry Barrick the following year. When graduation day arrived, Class A gathered together one last time as fully grown adults. Orion, Fendril, and Ivarn planned to remain in town, while others pursued different ambitions. Over time, Renika and Vereen had grown remarkably close to the young warrior, even if Tovin remained completely oblivious to romance. Teacher Draven and Marielle, who were now raising a 4-year-old daughter named Lyra, delivered a moving final speech. Draven cautioned the graduates that wielding such legendary dragon gear would inevitably attract envy and dangerous adversaries. The instructor urged them to hold their heads high and press forward with confidence. Tears were already streaming down the girls' faces as they whispered their goodbyes. Expressing deep gratitude to his mentors, Tovin closed the final chapter of his academy life. Stepping into the hallway as the ceremony began, the group walked together through the familiar corridors, catching the awed whispers of younger students. The graduates had become legendary figures on campus. Onlookers marveled at Orion's massive broadsword, Renika's sharp leadership, and Ivarn's subtle magic. Even Branya commanded fame, though she hated that everyone focused solely on her monstrous strength. Outside the hall, Tovin crossed paths with Michael, a former rival who had served as student council president. Mikkel openly admitted he stood no chance against Tovin in raw combat, but he had poured his intellect into reforming and modernizing the school instead. Exchanging warm wishes, the two parted ways as Michael prepared to return to his family domain. Near the entrance, Tovin spotted his adventurer companion Kyra, who was frantically dodging a relentless student named Nella. A sudden wave of excitement swept the hall when Astrid, Corinne, and Delwyn, old friends who had departed for the capital years ago, arrived for the celebration. Astrid had transformed into a celebrated idol, and her presence lit up the entire room. Addressing the crowd, the headmaster delivered a stirring address on how true freedom demands responsibility. Tovin took the stage to deliver the valedictory address on behalf of the class. Setting aside his prepared script, the young man spoke genuinely from his heart, thanking the faculty for protecting them and his classmates for becoming his family. From the stands, little Winla and the dragon Zarok cheered wildly, bringing bright smiles to the entire audience. Afterwards, a heartwarming reunion took place outside. Orion's father, Halvek, had just finished serving his 5-year sentence in prison. Standing alongside Orion's mother, the man waited anxiously until Orion rushed into his arms with tears. It marked a triumphant fresh start for the family, as Halvek embraced his freedom and fatherhood. While the rest of the class headed home to organize a celebration, Tovin made his way up to the quiet school rooftop for one final meeting. Branya, Neris, and Renika were already standing there, waiting for him. Stepping forward courageously, Branya confessed her love. Though Tovin gently rejected her proposal, she wept softly and gave him one last embrace, relieved to finally gain closure. Next, Neris stepped up to thank Tovin for everything he had done to protect her family. She voiced her hidden affection while acknowledging they had no future together, leaving Tovin to face Renika. Reaching into his coat, Tovin pulled out the pair of enchanted earrings teacher Draven had gifted him years ago. Tovin confessed that Renika was the one who held his heart and asked her to walk beside him forever. Overwhelmed with joy, Renika burst into happy tears and threw her arms around his neck. Right in the middle of their sweet moment, their eccentric teacher suddenly burst through the doorway, begging for an invitation to the party so she wouldn't be left behind. Laughing, the girls hauled her away, and Tovin and Renika walked hand in hand through the academy gates, stepping into their future. Years prior, a charming side story had unfolded at home, when Tovin's sister Winla was just 2 years old. One afternoon, while their mother napped, The adventurous toddler used the dragon Zaruk as a stepping stone to escape her crib. She slipped out into the garden, with Zaruk trailing closely behind to guard her. The loyal dragon dispatched a venomous snake nearing the girl before she wandered off toward town. In a quiet alley, Winla stumbled upon a lost baby forest wolf and instantly reached out to pet it. Realizing the pup was harmless, Zaruk let Winla ride on its back as they journeyed toward the mountain. Along the trail, they met their friend Sabet, who guided them safely to the mother wolf in the forest. Following a joyful reunion between the beasts, Zaruk carried the little girl safely back home. When their parents finally stirred, Winla was fast asleep in bed, oblivious to the grand adventure she had experienced. Later, Draven visited the household to formally invite the family to his upcoming wedding with Marielle. Because Marielle was of royal blood, the king demanded that the grand ceremony be celebrated at the royal castle. Tobin's sister Winla was a year old now, spending most days asleep on Zaruk's back. As the family packed for the journey, they teasingly predicted Barrack and Farah would marry next. Over at the castle, Marielle clashed with her father, King Aldemar. Marielle insisted on an intimate ceremony, while he demanded a grand feast. Her stepmother, Queen Vereen, finally offered a sincere apology for past cruelty. Queen Vereen admitted her bitterness stemmed from jealousy toward Marielle's mother, promising to make amends. The two royal women made peace, ending years of tension before the wedding. Instructor Valara presided over the ceremony, maintaining complete professionalism for once. Draven delivered a moving speech, admitting he never expected peace after years on the battlefield. The headmaster stepped forward to act as Draven's father figure, expressing deep pride in the honorable man Draven had become. To crown the celebration, Ivern invoked spirit magic, summoning the shade of Marielle's mother. The spirit offered her blessing before departing for the afterlife alongside departed companions. A full year passed following Tovin's graduation from the academy. He remained in his hometown to train and help his family, sparring constantly with Draven. Despite possessing an ability widely dismissed as trash, Tovin grew strong enough to overpower Draven in combat. Draven and Marielle now raised a lively 5-year-old daughter named Lyra, who adored playing with Tovin. Tovin also stayed to celebrate the wedding of his brother Barrack to Farah. Joy filled the village on their wedding day, bringing tears even to Zaruk the dragon. Watching the ceremony, Zaruk reflected on his long, draconic lifespan compared to mortals, choosing to protect Tovin's bloodline for generations to come. Tovin also bonded with Tomek, the 3-year-old son of Sabet and Ordwin, who idolized him. At last, the day arrived for Tovin and his girlfriend Renika to depart for the royal capital. He intended to demonstrate his true strength and serve the realm, while his younger sister Winla, now 5 years old with a rare summoning trait, had no idea he was leaving long-term. The moment Winla realized his departure wasn't a short trip, she burst into tears and desperately crammed her belongings into a travel bag. Tovin knelt to embrace her, gently explaining he had to leave to grow stronger. He promised to send frequent letters and return home whenever work allowed. Zaruk nudged the weeping girl, swearing to guard her while Tovin was away. Following tearful farewells with his parents and siblings, Tovin shouldered his pack and marched toward the town gates, his heart heavy, yet eager to build a new life in the capital alongside Renika. Along the road, Tovin met the elderly couple who had cared for him in infancy. He offered deep gratitude, and they beamed with pride at his growth, urging him to visit, though Tovin flushed red when they teased him about returning with grandchildren. With his brother already wed, Tovin realized a future with Renika was drawing closer. At the town gate, his entire circle of friends gathered to send him off. Orion, Branya, and Ivarn had officially formed an adventuring party together. Orion prized his dragon-forged blade, yet continued practicing with standard steel to avoid laziness. Nevin had grown tall and commanded his ghost magic with newfound confidence. Findra was thriving as he managed his family's fish market, while Wilkin finished his studies abroad just in time for the farewell. The Vereen sisters teased Tovin about his high status, hinting he might take multiple wives, which thoroughly irritated Renika right as their former instructors arrived. Headmaster Marin presented Tovin with a formal letter of recommendation for a capital contact. Sabet handed Tovin and Renika handmade protective charms for safe travel. Draven and Marielle brought young Lyra, who wept at losing her favorite older brother. Sabet's son Tomek puffed out his chest, promising to keep Lyra company while Tovin was away. Draven offered a final warning, reminding Tovin that capital nobles were sharp and treacherous. As a final gift, his classmates pooled their coin to present a fine horse and carriage. A mysterious driver wrapped in a deep cloak was hired to navigate the trip. As the wheels turned, Tovin and Renika waved until their friends faded into the distance. From the tree line along the highway, 3 cloaked figures watched the carriage vanish. Among them stood the masterminds behind the earlier kidnapping, including the rogue student Zafine. They identified themselves as members of the Ashen Veil, with Zafine obsessed with bearing Tovin's children. Their leader, Voreth, noted Tovin's rapid growth and potential to unlock ancient magic. They resolved to trail him toward the capital, treating his progression as a prize subject. Inside the quiet carriage, Tovin and Renika shared a private romantic moment. Suddenly, the cloaked driver burst into violent coughing and gagging noises. The driver pulled off her hood, revealing herself as teacher Valara. She had planned a surprise with Varine, but got stuck listening to Tovin and Renika flirting for far too long. Valara explained she had stepped down as a teacher and was recalled to her old post in the capital. She noted that crops were failing across neighboring regions, while monster sightings were climbing, which played right into why her superiors needed her back. Pausing their journey, they pulled into a border town to rest. Stepping into a local pub, they spotted a group of rowdy adventurers cornering a man named Ferric. These thugs were trying to drag Ferric back across the border into Senrock territory. When violence broke out, Tovin turned invisible, bolstered his muscle strength, and hurled the thugs across the tavern. Renika waded into the scuffle to clear the room until the thugs fled shouting threats, leaving Ferric to offer his thanks. Ferric explained he possessed a rare detection skill that revealed the Senrock forests were crawling with tree ants. These ancient tree monsters were destroying local farms. But when he warned the Lord of Senrak, the Lord dismissed his warnings and actively buried the reports. To make matters worse, Ferric's own party abandoned him to avoid getting dragged into the dispute. Valara perked up at his story, realizing it tied directly into the widespread crop blights she was tracking. She immediately began flirting with Ferric, taking a shine to his rugged charm and experience. With a corrupt noble in their path, the party agreed to investigate the Lord of Senrak as they pushed ahead. Tovin, Renika, and Valar wrapped up their meal alongside Ferric. As the rest of the table grew lightheaded, Tovin used his Everycraft skill to burn off the alcohol, keeping his mind clear so he could guide the intoxicated Renika and Valara back to their rooms at the inn. Ferric was stunned to hear that Tovin was the son of a prominent lord, but Tovin assured him he was traveling simply to demonstrate how formidable his supposedly useless skill really was. At first light, the party set off toward the borders of Senrak. Along the road, Tovin displayed his magic for Ferric, taking to the air and hurling fireballs. Ferric watched in awe, amazed that someone so young could outshine seasoned veterans. Any lingering doubts vanished, and Ferric placed his full trust in the young noble. That evening around the campfire, Ferric picked up the scent of stalkers hiding in the tree line. Tovin slipped into the shadows invisibly and closed in on the lurkers. He struck quickly, capturing 3 men led by Zolmar, a former companion from Ferric's old party. Zolmar swore they meant no harm, explaining they were desperate to bring Ferric back to the domain. It turned out the Lord of Senrock had received a blackmail letter, explaining why. He had refused to dispatch guards to handle the treant infestation in the first place. Shaken by the threat, the Lord now needed Ferric's tracking talent to secure his estate. Upon reaching Senrock town, Valara headed straight for the Adventurers Guild to gather intelligence. While Tovin and Renika scouted around for a place to stay, a young student named Alessia sprinted around the corner and collided with them at full speed. Tovin reacted instantly, weaving magic to catch her safely before she hit the cobblestones. Blown away by his reflexes, Alessia threw herself at Tovin and Renika, begging them to take her as a student. She poured out her heart, explaining her family was in danger and she needed strength to protect them. Over at the guild, Valar questioned the local hands and discovered the tree ants were striking in oddly specific patterns. The targeted attacks convinced her the crop failures were no accident, but calculated moves in a sinister scheme, prompting her to arrange an immediate meeting with the Lord. Tovin gently turned down Alessia's request for lessons, knowing their stop in town was brief, and fearing that half-baked training would give her false confidence in battle. Disappointed, Alessia promised to return tomorrow to share her troubles, right as Valara reappeared with news. Having mapped out the situation, Valara confirmed Ferric would accompany them to the Lord's manor at sunrise. Arriving at the estate the following morning, they were stunned to discover Alessia was actually Lord Bramwell's daughter. Lord Bramwell himself was a nervous wreck, haunted by the warning note left in his study. The message threatened that if he took action against the treants, his daughter would pay with her life. That ultimatum was the exact reason he had ignored the crop blights and driven Ferric away. Valara stepped forward and revealed her official credentials as a high-ranking Imperial officer. She decided to post herself inside the mansion as an advisor, while Tovin and Renika slipped back to the inn to serve as discreet backup. Unbeknownst to them, the local guildmaster, Radomir, was secretly in league with Tovin's nemesis, Voreth. Together, they were orchestrating the treant crisis to bankrupt Lord Bramwell and seize control of Senrak. Learning Tovin had entered the territory, the conspirators began adjusting their plans to eliminate him. Back at the inn, Ferric met Tovin in secret, warning him that Guildmaster Radomir was acting visibly strange. Smelling a trap, Toven and Renica picked up cheap novice gear from a local shop to disguise themselves as green adventurers before investigating the guild hall. Dressed in their plain rookie armor, Toven and Renica entered the guild, greeted by a cheerful receptionist named Yenna. Yenna welcomed them warmly and immediately started chatting with Renica about her obvious crush on Ferric. Scanning the job board as they talked, Toven noticed a bounty for the treants, though Yenna warned them the request was strictly off-limits. Out of nowhere, Guildmaster Radomir stepped forward, carrying a rough, hostile presence. Toven put on a smirk, deliberately provoking a reaction from the guild leader. Infuriated, Radomir swung a heavy fist, but Toven slipped past the strike by a hair. Stunned by Toven's speed, Radomir ordered them onto a group expedition in 2 days to hunt tree monsters. Away from public eyes, Radomir met in secret with Voreth, confirming their quiet alliance. Learning that Toven had arrived in town delighted Voreth, who saw him as an entertaining toy. Their scheme relied on driving the unsuspecting adventurers into the monsters as living sacrifices. Meanwhile, Toven and Renica slipped silently back into the Lord's estate. They found Valara cornered in the cellar, thoroughly drunk on the Lord's finest vintage. Once Toven bound her up to enforce some order, they briefed Lord Bramwell and Valara on the guild mission. Sensing a trap behind the order, Toven resolved to join the hunt and expose Radomir's hidden game. When the morning of the mission arrived, 30 adventurers gathered in the courtyard behind the guild. Radomir brought forward a strange guide named Talvin, his entire face wrapped in heavy bandages. Boarding the supply wagons, the party started their trek deep into the woods. Along the trail, Toven and Renica traded remarks with friendly mercenaries like Cave and Sprig, who dismissed them as lucky kids. A sudden monster ambush on the road posed no threat, as Toven and Renica shattered the beasts effortlessly. Before long, the expedition came to a quiet clearing buried deep in the forest. While the others saw an ideal campsite, Toven immediately recognized the setup for an ambush. Without warning, a massive horde of dark, corrupted tree monsters surged from the brush. Unlike ordinary beasts, these creatures moved with terrifying speed and unnatural strength. As the mercenary line began to break under the onslaught, Toven stepped to the front. Unleashing a soaring dragon of fire, he incinerated a wide path through the timber beasts, while Renica shattered their dense wooden hides with heavy magical strikes. With the battle quieted, the group discovered that Talvin, their bandaged guide, had slipped away. The betrayal was clear. He had steered them directly into an execution ground. Refusing to let him escape, the party sprinted into the dense timber after him. Toven swept Renica into his arms and used levitation magic to glide through the canopy. Closing the gap in seconds, he bore down on the fleeing bandaged guide. A quick water spell swept Talvin off his feet, and cornered with nowhere to run, the guide surrendered every detail. He confessed that Guildmaster Radomir was the mastermind pulling the strings behind the monster attacks. Radomir intended to ruin the Lord's standing, opening the path to seize control of the domain. Desperate for his life, Talvin offered to guide them to the monster source in exchange for mercy. Meanwhile, back at the estate, a squad of thugs hired by Radomir breached the gates. They lunged for the Lord's daughter Alessia, but a brilliant ward repelled their blades. The small, stuffed dragon resting in her arms suddenly stirred to life. It was Zaruk, the legendary dragon Toven had stationed there as a silent guardian. Zaruk expanded into his massive dragon form and crushed the attackers in seconds. Valara, emerging from the dining hall after her drinking spell, helped secure the thugs for questioning. Deep within the woods, the tracking party reached a pool of glowing mud. Throwing off his disguise, Talvin revealed his true identity as Voreth, the old enemy from Toven's past. With a harsh command, Voreth raised a colossal, glowing tree beast vastly superior to the rest. The titan battered the party across the glade until Toven and Renica stepped forward to take command. Renica drove powerful blows into its core with her gauntlets, while Toven weakened it with roaring flames. Drawing his dragon-tooth blade, Toven delivered a decisive strike that destroyed the creature entirely. Caught in the collapse, Voreth was pinned beneath a massive falling trunk, yet he triggered an unsettling dark regeneration, mending his broken body before slipping into the shadows. He voiced genuine delight at Toven's growth, eagerly anticipating their next clash. Searching the pool after the beast fell, Toven retrieved a radiant blue stone from the bottom. The moment his fingers closed around the gem, every remaining tree monster in the forest withered to ash. The crisis was averted for now, though Toven knew Radomir and Voreth were already plotting something far worse. Over at the guild hall, Radomir paced nervously, wondering why his estate hit squad had failed to report back. The doors swung open, and Voreth strode inside alongside his shadowy lieutenants. Radomir stood frozen, shocked to see Voreth alive after the disaster in the forest. Voreth burst into mocking laughter, declaring the entire operation an absolute failure. The tree beasts were wiped out, and the squad sent to the mansion had been captured by a powerful guardian. He added a stern warning that the woman accompanying Ferric was secretly a high-ranking government official. After ridiculing Radomir's incompetent planning, Voreth and his entourage vanished into thin air, leaving the guildmaster in terror. Tovin and Renika made their return to town, heading immediately for Lord Bramwell's estate. They found the gate sentries battered on the ground, though Valara had intervened just in time to save them. Heading inside, they discovered Valara interrogating the bound prisoners through her own bizarre methods. She feasted on rich steak and sausages right in front of the starving group. Tovin urged one of the captured thugs to confess, reminding him that though the past was done, he could still choose a better path. With the thugs remaining silent, the party marched them to the guild to confront Radomir. Upon reaching the hall, however, Radomir was nowhere to be seen. The receptionist, Yenna, explained that he fled right after meeting a mysterious, handsome stranger. Lord Bramwell addressed the assembled adventurers, apologizing for his cowardice and for letting the town suffer. The crowd proved surprisingly forgiving, and the mood quickly shifted into celebration. Everyone gathered at the mansion for a massive feast to mark the end of the monster threat. Late into the festivities, a severely injured guard burst into the hall and collapsed. Radomir strode in right behind him, flanked by the thugs he had just broken out of jail. Seething with rage, Radomir declared his hatred for the Lord over a tragedy 15 years ago. The Lord had ignored a monster attack on a nearby village, leaving Radomir's girlfriend to perish. Radomir pulled out a vial of the same dark potion Tovin recognized, the Beast Transformation Elixir. Tovin lunged to disarm him, but Radomir downed the liquid first. Valara closed the distance and slammed a heavy fist into his gut, forcing him to spit most of it up. Having swallowed only a fraction, Radomir spared himself full transformation. Yet, the surge of dark mana was still immense, sending shockwaves through the floor as he swung his blade. Though slipping into madness, Radomir possessed terrifying strength and lashed out at everyone in sight. Tovin unsheathed his blade, intent on ending the fight before more lives were lost. Radomir unleashed a violent arc of wind that scattered the surrounding fighters, but Tovin remained unfazed, stepping forward with his dragon-toothed sword as the others shielded the Lord. Radomir triggered a shockwave skill, detonating the stone beneath Tovin and launching him upward. Flight magic stabilized Tovin instantly, letting him cast a counter fireball from above. Meanwhile, Zarok expanded the human size and engulfed the 5 thugs in a wall of flame. The blast knocked the thugs unconscious, allowing Cave and Sprig to bind them tight. As the men were secured, Tovin spotted a strange scorpion mark inked onto their shoulders. Turning his attention back to the fight, he saw Radomir pressing the other adventurer hard. Tovin leaped forward, bringing his blade down with full force. The strike shattered Radomir's high-grade sword in two. Before Radomir could recover, Tovin struck swift and crippled his sword arm to finish it. When Radomir tried to lash out with his offhand, Renika intercepted him. She reminded him that grief over a lost love was no excuse for madness, and that his girlfriend would never want him to become a monster. While Valara spotted an opening, and Tovin and Renika delivered a synchronized strike that sent Radomir crashing into the stone wall. Though unconscious, he survived, unaware that Voreth and his observers watched from the surrounding trees. Unbothered by the outcome, they were merely testing a strength and healing elixir. Though Voreth noted Tovin's growth, word had come from their leader, the Pope, recalling the unit back to headquarters. Hinting at a grander scheme for the kingdom's future, the cultists melted back into the shadows. Inside the mansion, Tovin channeled his magic to mend the wounded guards and adventurers. Zaruk assisted with the aftermath, displaying an uncannily human mannerism. With order restored, Tovin interrogated the captured cultists. They confessed to membership in the Covenant of the Descents, a cult targeting the desperate with food, shelter, and a promise of vengeance. Led by a pope whose magic was truly terrifying. A single glance into the leader's eyes stripped victims of their morality, turning them into mindless puppets. Tovin realized that the bandaged guide who led them through the forest was Voreth in disguise. Known as the Undying, Voreth possessed the uncanny ability to survive even fatal wounds. Examining the scorpion tattoos with his magic vision, Tovin recognized a dark curse designed for control and tracking. To free them, Tovin sliced away the branded skin and healed the wounds instantly, while Zarok reduced the cursed flesh to ash. Just as Radomir stirred and learned the truth, Radomir realized the cult had orchestrated the monster attack 15 years ago to manipulate his grief. Crushed by the realization, He begged Tovin to remove his own mark. He vowed to accept his sentence and swore vengeance against the Pope for ruining his life. Valara arranged to escort the captives to the royal capital for deeper interrogation. With order restored, Valara resumed her relentless pursuit of Ferric, while Tovin enjoyed a rare moment of quiet after the battle. Entering a calm week in town, Zarek decided to return home to watch over Tovin's younger sister. Before departing, the dragon urged Tovin to stay vigilant against those who would exploit his strength. Tovin and Renika spent the passing days teaching the Lord's daughter, Alessia, basic self-defense. When capital guards arrived to transport the prisoners, the companions bade their final farewells. Ferric takes over as the new guildmaster, while Radomir gives Tovin one final warning about the cult leader's true cruelty. The group sets out for the royal capital, a massive fortress city enclosed by towering walls. At the gates, they meet a guard named Peric, who once went to school alongside teacher Valara. Laughing, Peric recalls how Valara was the biggest troublemaker in their entire class. Inside the palace, Tovin presents the king and Prince Neldar with a thorough report on the cult, while before Valara can finish, her brother Torgon bursts in and drags her back to her government position. The king offers Tovin an influential position in the military, but Tovin politely turns him down. Free from royal obligations, Tovin chooses to forge his own path as an adventurer alongside Renika. Searching for lodging in the capital, Tovin and Renika step into a local real estate agency. The receptionist, Yorin, acts condescending, assuming the young couple cannot afford anything decent. Hoping to dismiss them, Yorin tries to shove them into a run-down room lacking even a basic bath. Losing his patience, Tovin pulls out a thick stack of high-value banknotes. He reveals his status as a noble and a wealthy designer, leaving the clerk frozen in shock. Realizing his massive mistake, Yorin drops to his knees and bows repeatedly to appease his rich client. Rather than settling for a temporary rental, Tovin decides to outright purchase a home. Wanting Renika to be comfortable, Tovin buys a spacious mansion on the spot for 2 million gold pieces. The property is spectacular, boasting an expansive yard, private stables, and a fully equipped kitchen. Once settled in, the two enjoy a peaceful pasta lunch, finally breathing easy in the capital. Their quiet afternoon shatters when they spot Valara pressed flat against their window like a bug. She escaped the castle to flee her overbearing brother, who was attempting to force her into an unwanted marriage. Desperate, Valara begs for a place to hide, and Renika agrees under one strict condition. The king must cover a portion of their house payments if Valara plans to stay under their roof. Valara adds that staying nearby allows her to protect Tovin from any vengeful cult survivors. Bright and early the next morning, Valara wakes up in a panic after oversleeping her first shift at the palace. Panicking, she leaps onto one of Tovin's horses without asking, and she tears through the quiet streets toward the castle, causing total chaos across the neighborhood. With the commotion settled, Tovin and Renika head to the local adventurer guild to register. The receptionist, Mirabelle, eyes them with doubt, suspecting they are just spoiled aristocrats. Seeing Renika at the counter, a bulky adventurer named Dagon struts over to hit on her while mocking Tovin. Refusing to let the insult slide, Tovin challenges the loudmouth to a duel in the training yard. Dagon opens with a crushing hammer technique called Iron Maul, but Tovin easily dodges the heavy strike. Activating his unique skill, Tovin mirrors the Iron Maul and slams Dagon into the dirt, knocking him unconscious. Coming to his senses, Dagon takes his defeat gracefully and offers Tovin a sincere apology. Stunned by the display, the surrounding adventurers immediately gain a newfound respect for Tovin. Meanwhile, near Tovin's family estate, his sister Winla spots a ragged man glaring at their gates with deep hatred. The stranger is actually the father of Farah, the girl who recently married Tovin's older brother. Furious that his daughter married into nobility without his consent, he harbors a bitter desire for revenge. As the old man drowns his anger in liquor, a mysterious figure named Seker approaches his table. Seker reveals himself as an operative of the sinister Covenant cult, and he offers the vengeful father a deal, setting a dangerous plot against Tovin's family in motion. Back at the guild hall, Tovin and Renika return to the front counter to finish registering. Mirabelle chuckles, admitting she deliberately used Tovin to humble the arrogant Dagon. For their debut quest, the pair selects a contract to hunt red elks in the eastern mountain range. Remembering that Valara stole their horse to reach the palace, they swing by the castle gates to retrieve it. Inside the administrative offices, Valara powers through her paperwork at a terrifying speed, stunning her colleagues. The moment Tovin and Renika arrive, Valara abandons her desk to join their mountain hunt. Trudging up the snowy slopes, Renika explains she fights with bare fists because knightly weapons feel unnatural to her. The group slays 2 red elks easily, but a third beast lunges from the brush in a surprise ambush. Out of nowhere, an elderly woman named Asla drops from the canopy and slashes the monster down instantly. Asla introduces herself as a retired master martial artist living as a mountain hermit. She invites the party to her cottage, explaining that her husband, along with another legendary martial artist, is currently traveling the realm in search of a worthy disciple. Recognizing Renika's raw power with the Titan Knuckle, Asla offers to train her personally. Though honored by the offer, Renika asks for time to think it over before committing. After wrapping up the hunt, the party returns to the capital to attend a guild banquet. Valara tries entering in an extravagant gown, but her companions force her into practical attire instead. At the tavern, veteran adventurers share stories of Valara's wild youth, reminding everyone they still refer to her as the demon of the guild due to her past rampages. The party grows even rowdier when Valara's protective brother Torgen crashes the venue to monitor her. Toven and Renika spend the evening building connections, earning respect, and meeting Guildmaster Grubar. Though Guildmaster Grubar comes off as a sleepy, harmless old man, Toven senses an immense, dangerous strength beneath his calm exterior. At the guild party, Grubar mentions that the king himself has been asking about Toven. Seeing how down-to-earth Toven acts, Grubar admits he expected a far more arrogant noble. Toven explains that he was born poor and earned his title later, so status means nothing to him. Grubar can hardly believe a 10-year-old boy organized a major operation and wiped out cultists. Once the celebration winds down, Toven carries the sleepy machine back home. Late that night, Renika and Toven discuss the offer from the martial arts teacher Asla. Toven urges her to choose her own path, rather than just tagging along behind him. Renika declares that she wants to train hard enough to stand beside him as an equal. A quiet, sweet moment settles between them, until Valara ruins it by peeking from the hallway. The following morning, the pair head into the mountains so Renika can formally request Asla to train her. To gauge her skill, Asla challenges Renika on the spot, moving even faster than their old instructor Draven. Renika manages to grace her once, but Asla ends the duel instantly with a surge of lightning that knocks her out. Tobin steps in and heals her immediately, leaving Asla stunned by the sheer power of his restoration magic. Asla soon realizes that if Renika moves all the way to the mountain sanctuary, separation from Toven will shatter her focus and drive. To solve the problem, Asla decides to move right into Toven's backyard, hiring a master carpenter named Haskell, who activates a specialized building skill to construct a cabin and a stable in under 2 hours. That evening, everyone gathers in the yard for a barbecue. Toven weaves wind magic to carve perfect wooden chairs straight out of raw logs, which leaves Asla thoroughly impressed as they discuss the cult and note the strange disappearance of ocean fish, pointing toward a potential crisis for the realm before training starts the next morning. Asla reveals that her secret technique is true breath, allowing a warrior to stay perfectly calm in the chaos of battle. She demonstrates how to channel lightning directly into raw fist strikes. Though Renika struggles with spellwork, Asla promises to hammer her into a lightning expert. With Renika fully immersed in her drills, Toven finds himself with nothing to do. He cooks breakfast for the household and decides to head into the city to catch up with Astrid and gather new recipes. Toven ventures into the bustling city market alone to fetch ingredients for a special dinner. Stopping by a butcher shop owned by Hod, he asks for a batch of ground meat. Since locals consider ground meat fit only for pets, Hod gives him a bewildered look, but curiosity takes over once Toven explains the dish he plans to create. While passing through a nearby park, Toven spots a young girl named Tessie whispering to a tiny tree. The shy girl panics the moment he approaches and darts away into the crowd. Returning home, Toven grills up a batch of fresh hamburgers. Renika, Asla, and Valara take their first bites and are completely blown away by the flavor. A few days later, Toven and Renika take a breather from training to visit their former classmate Astrid, who now stars as a solo idol at the Royal Theater, stopping first to drop off sample food for Hod, the butcher, who loves the dish so much he grants them a permanent discount on meat. Reaching the theater, they catch up with Astrid and meet her energetic assistant Pippa, along with her manager Venora. The theater owner Ostwin tries to recruit Toven and Renika into showbiz on account of their striking looks, but Toven shuts down the proposal instantly, promising only to return that evening for Astrid's show. Stepping back out into the streets, they find the city in a state of panic. Dagon rushes up to inform them that a little girl vanished following an argument with her mother. Toven immediately recognizes the description. It's Tessie, the girl from the park. To cover ground quickly, Toven uses flight magic to lift Renika high above the rooftops for a bird's eye view. High up in the castle, Valara spots them airborne and uses the uproar as an excuse to ditch her boring paperwork, while Toven checks in with the gate guards who confirm no child has passed through. meaning she must still be hiding inside the massive city. Sweeping over the livestock district, Toven and Renika spot Ozla standing near Toven's horses. Toven panics, assuming she's preparing to sell them off to a butcher, but Ozla is merely putting the beasts to work on a farm so they don't grow lazy. A local farmer reports seeing a young child running toward the massive tree near the outer wall earlier that morning. Inspecting the giant tree, Toven notices a thick branch extending far beyond the city boundary. He realizes Tessie used her plant magic to grow a wooden bridge and slip out into the wilderness. After alerting the Adventurers Guild, they charge into the dense forest and hear a sharp scream. They spot Tessie cornered by 5 goblins, with a tiny treant standing heroically in front of her to block the beasts. Toven and Renika leap into the clearing to join the fight. Toven unleashes fire magic and slashes through the goblins with his sword, while Renika uses her newly learned lightning strikes and heavy punches to wipe out the rest. Tessie tearfully admits she ran away because her mother called the moving tree creepy and wanted to throw it out. Suddenly, 20 more goblins step out of the shadows and encircle the group. Valara arrives with Dagon's party of adventurers to assist, but Toven motions for them to stay back. A massive surge of water sweeps the goblins into the air before a blast of dragon fire obliterates them instantly. The onlookers stand speechlessly, stunned by the sheer power Toven had been concealing. Seeing how the mini-treant protected Tessie, Toven resolves to take the little creature in. Valara points out that keeping a monster inside city limits requires a tamer license, so Toven agrees to obtain one before returning Tessie safely to her parents, who are so overwhelmed with relief that they apologize for their hostility and consent to let the spirit live with Toven. Having collected their guild reward, Toven and Renika put on fine attire to catch Astrid's theatrical performance. The hall is packed to capacity, and Astrid delivers a breathtaking display of singing and dance. Spotting the pair in the front row, she flashed them a quick wink from the stage. Witnessing Astrid's dedication inspires Toven and Renika to push themselves even harder in training. Later that night, Toven slumps over the table asleep and enters a vivid dream. The mini-treant manifests before him, taking the likeness of a small boy. The child clarifies that his kind are benevolent spirits rather than malicious monsters. He cautions Toven against Nethroot, predatory dark plant monsters that tarnish the reputation of true spirits. Requesting a name, the boy asks to stay by Toven's side right as the dream dissolves. Waking up in the living room, Toven recounts the strange vision to Renika and Valara. Toven details how the mini-treant is a spirit warning of Nethroots, predatory tree-like monsters tarnishing real spirits. As Minister of Agriculture, Valara recognizes the weight of this revelation and decides to inform the king and guild, though. She cautions Toven once again that bringing a monster inside urban walls requires a tamer license. Valara advises him to check out the tamer facility near the livestock quarter tomorrow. Come morning, Valara departs for the castle, eager for the burger feast Toven pledged to cook tonight. Renika remains at home to push through another intense training session alongside Ozla. Toven leads his horses to a neighboring farm so they can work the fields while he attends to errands. The farmer cautions that the local tamer facility has fallen into neglect and stands largely abandoned. Arriving at the grounds, Toven finds the facility silent and noticeably run down. He encounters the administrator, Wendrick, a visibly stressed man weighed down by financial ruin. Wendrick admits the taming profession died out due to steep feeding costs and stifling regulations. Unfazed, Toven applies for the highest tier large monster permit and pays the hefty fee up front. Wendrick stares in disbelief, overjoyed that he can finally clear his debts and afford a proper meal. Opening the instruction, Wendrick outlines the core fundamentals. A tamer must overpower the beast, and bestowing a formal name upon a monster significantly amplifies its strength. Toven decides to name the mini-treant Sprig, and the moment the words leave his lips, Sprig sprouts a sharp new leaf atop his head, while a surge of energy fills his frame. The little spirit attempts to lift Toven to display his newfound power, only to lose his balance and tumble over. For practical training, Wendrick presents a rare frost tiger, along with her young cub. The adult tiger instantly recoils in terror and bows low before Toven. Toven realizes the reaction stems from his long companionship with the mighty dragon Zaruk, as he still carries a lingering dragon aura that frightens lesser beasts. Far across the border, a sinister gathering takes place within the kingdom of Thornreach. Thornreach's monarch conspires directly with the Pope, leader of the Covenant cult. Frustrated by failures in other realms, the conspirators set their sights on the territory of Grendale. Their plot to seize control hinges on eliminating a younger prince who stands in their path. Toven heads home with Sprig, bringing the tiger cub along to continue honing his taming techniques. Presenting the radiant gem retrieved from the pond, Toven hands it to Ozla for examination. Ozla turns pale, identifying the stone as a sage's soul, created by sacrificing countless creatures in a profane ritual. Sprig breaks into tears as he realizes the crystal contains the harvested souls of his fallen companions. Tobin comforts the spirit with a promise of protection, noticing the gem has unlocked a unique ability for Sprig. Tobin spends the evening grilling an array of gourmet burgers for the household. The feast proves such a magnificent success that no one grows tired of eating. Even the hesitant tiger cub casts aside its caution, warming up to Tobin for a slice of meat. To soothe Sprig's lingering grief over his fallen kin, Tobin settles the little spirit into a relaxing water bucket. Stepping outside, Tobin discovers that Renika and Asla spent the day fully transforming the backyard. The pair excavated a fresh pond for Sprig and erected target dummies for Renika's martial drills. Over the next fortnight, a steady stream of guests arrives to admire the refurbished estate. Tessie drops by to play with Sprig, while Astrid brings along her fellow performers. Even Wendrick visits alongside the mother Frost Tiger, who yearn to reunite with her cub. Dagon and his fellow adventurers join the gathering, sharing drinks to celebrate the new residents. Tobin delights the crowd by serving up a freshly crafted batch of pudding. The treat proves so popular that his companions playfully urge him to abandon adventuring and open an eatery. The peaceful atmosphere vanished when teacher Valara brought grim news. The Grindale territory had fallen into complete chaos. Mikhail, Tobin's old academy rival, stood accused of attempting to murder his stepmother. With charges so severe, the young noble faced the death penalty. Tobin felt torn, knowing Mikkel was stubborn but hardly a cold-blooded killer. Getting involved threatened to draw his family and companions into danger. That evening, Renika sat Tobin down to ease his spiraling worries. She reminded him that they had survived countless deadly battles together in the past. Renika urged him to follow his instincts and save his friend. Strengthened by Renika's support, Tobin resolved to travel to Grendale to uncover the truth. Both Valara and Asla offered to accompany them without hesitation. Valara disclosed that her brother Torgen, a high-ranking judge, was already en route to investigate. She hoped to reach the domain first to inspect the monster tree crisis and avoid her brother's bossy attitude. Inside the royal castle, King Aldemar reviewed the situation and dispatched an official inquiry team. Prince Neldar volunteered to join, but the king ordered him to remain behind for protection. Tobin modified their wagon, constructing hidden storage beneath the seats for extra equipment. During preparations, Sprig developed a love for orange juice and nearly dove headfirst into a bowl. Just as packing finished, Valara rushed everyone to depart immediately. She aimed to establish a lead before her brother caught up on the road. Loading their gear, the party set off toward Grendale territory. Everyone stood prepared to face whatever dark mystery awaited them. Tobin and his companions traveled for 2 days toward Grendale. The journey proved far more dangerous than expected due to swarming monsters. A pack of wolves ambushed the carriage, but Tobin incinerated them with fire magic. Giant birds dove from the sky, but Asla shot them down with ease. As night fell, the group reached a nearby town to seek shelter. At a local tavern, an intoxicated brawler named Modric tried to grab Valara. Valara refused to tolerate the assault and beat him severely. Tobin had to use healing magic on the man to save his life. Once sober, Modric proved surprisingly polite and purchased a round of drinks and apology. Modric warned them that Grindale was becoming extremely dangerous and advised them to stay away. Meanwhile, Torgen's large investigation team trailed far behind as Tobin's party finally reached Grendale territory. The town was built like a fortress, ringed by a deep moat with a single drawbridge for entry. The gate guards acted rudely at first. Their hostility vanished the moment Valara displayed her official badge as a high minister. The travelers were quickly escorted to an inn to await an audience with the domain's leader. Aslan noticed the town felt unnaturally quiet, which signaled danger. Soon, an invitation summoned the group to Lord Harnob's mansion. The party entered the hall to meet Lord Harnov, his wife Delira, and their son Ardo. Ardo acted arrogantly from the start, making unwanted advances toward Renika. Tobin shut him down by revealing his own high noble status, forcing Ardo to back off in a hurry. When asked about Mikkel, the family claimed they hadn't seen him or his sister Junia in over a year. Dismissing Mikkel as a total failure, they showed no concern for his fate. Delira mentioned hiring a specialized mercenary group to clear out local monsters. As Tobin's group left the mansion, a young guard named Off took control of their carriage. Instead of heading to the inn, Off drove toward a deserted area. Off explained he was taking them to meet a key informant who knew the truth. Meanwhile, the former tavern brawler Vane arrived at the Lord's mansion. Vane was actually a mercenary hired by Delira, engaged in a sinister plot. Off led Tobin and the group into a hidden basement beneath a rundown house. Inside, they found Mikkel's sister Hunia, who had been hiding for months. Hunia explained that she and Mikkel fled the mansion due to severe mistreatment from Delira and Ardo. She told Tobin that 6 months ago, Michael visited the mansion for his belongings and returned utterly terrified. Mikkel gave her a stash of coin, ordered her to run, and vanished into the night. Toven's group was shocked to learn Hunia knew nothing about Mikkel attempting to kill their stepmother. Balara deduced that the distress message sent to the kingdom was actually a fake story fabricated by Mikkel himself. Mikkel had intentionally framed himself to force high-level royal investigators to expose his family's crimes. Toven told Hunia to remain hidden and promised to locate her missing brother. The next morning, the arrogant noble Ardo arrived at the inn to hit on Renika. Ardo began bragging about his high status, but Renika shut Ardo down hard, telling him his personality was as ugly as his face. Balara and Toven joined in on the roasting until Ardo stormed off in a rage, swearing revenge. From there, the party headed to the local guild hall, which was packed with adventurers. Inside, Toven's group ran into Modric, the man they had met at the tavern earlier. In truth, Modric was Vane, leader of a powerful mercenary band. Vane warned Toven to stay clear of the upcoming monster hunt. What Toven didn't know was that Vane was secretly working for Delira. Vane's true mission was to slaughter the royal investigation team upon arrival and blame the attack on monsters. While exploring the town, Toven learned that the locals deeply respected Mikkel and Hunia for constantly helping the poor. That night, Toven experienced another vivid dream, speaking face-to-face with Sprig. Taking on a humanoid shape, the plant spirit introduced a new technique known as Sun Spear. Under direct sunlight, Sun Spear empowers Sprig with immense strength and heightened aggression. Meanwhile, Michael crouched silently on a high rooftop in the dark. In Mikkel's hand was the family's crest medallion, the key to their wealth and authority. Suddenly, a mysterious figure named Varkos stepped from the shadows. Varkos warned Michael that Lord Harnov was in grave danger, as Delira planned to assassinate him for full control. Handing over a secret letter, Varkos instructed Mikkel to find a red artifact hidden by Delira and deliver it to Toven. Knowing he could not handle the crisis alone, Michael decided to reach Toven at once. Toven flew across the town using his magic and met with the local guard. Toven learned that Delira had personally hired the mercenaries, a move that seemed deeply suspicious. Meanwhile, Valara's brother Torgen arrived with a large squad of investigators. After joining up with Torgen, Toven's party marched on the mansion to confront the Lord's family. During the confrontation, the arrogant Ardo blurted about that Mikkel had taken the family's heirloom medallion. Without that medallion proving their right to rule, the noble house faced total ruin. Torgen gave the family 1 week to locate the medallion, or face royal judgment. Delira quickly proposed a joint monster hunt in the forest, pretending she wanted to assist. Balara later noted that local crops were thriving far too well for a monster-infested region, leading her to suspect the Lord's family was secretly controlling the beasts. While Delira plotted to murder her husband and frame Mikkel, Toven's group prepared for the hunt. Before setting off, Vane warned Toven once again to back off, but Toven refused to yield, and the hunting party soon marched into the forest alongside the mercenaries. Tree monsters and direwolves ambushed the group almost immediately. Toven and Renika fought off the creatures with magic and steel, but the battle suddenly took a strange turn. A massive mother bear crashed through the brush, snatched Valara, and dragged her deeper into the woods. Taking advantage of the chaos, Vane's mercenaries vanished, leaving Toven and his allies surrounded by monsters. Amid the chaos, a tiny bear cub wandered onto the bloody battlefield, helpless and lost. Toven unleashed his water magic to blast a path through the wolf pack, opening space for the knights to rally. Toven scooped up the bear cub and handed Bruno to Renika for protection. Seeing its pack overpowered, the alpha wolf yielded, and Toven spared the beasts. Looking around, the party realized that Balara's brother Torgen had disappeared, having slipped away into the woods to search for his sister. Deep in the forest, Balara broke free from the giant bear's grasp, only to find herself cornered. At that moment, Vane and his mercenaries stepped in and struck the mother bear down. Vane claimed he had stepped in out of affection for Valara, but Valara saw straight through the lie. Realizing the bear attack was a setup to isolate her, Valara spotted a scorpion tattoo inked onto Vane's shoulder, proving his allegiance to the evil cult known as the Covenant of the Descent. Valara revealed that she was a survivor from a kingdom destroyed by that very cult years ago. Torgen emerged from the trees, and the siblings joined forces to crush the mercenaries. Harnessing his incredible speed, Torgen hurled stones like deadly bullets, wiping out Vane and his men before they could even draw their blades. When Toven's party finally arrived, they found Valara and Torgen standing unharmed amidst the fallen mercenaries. Toven cast healing magic on the mother bear and reunited Ursula with her cub, using a strange enchanted ring taken from the defeated mercenaries. Toven then commanded both bears to return peacefully to the deep forest. Sensing immediate danger, Tovin sprinted back toward the noble mansion. Inside, Delira made her move against Lord Harnov, ordering hidden assassins to murder him so Ardo could claim the seat. Just as the blades descended, Michael leapt from the shadows to shield his father. Tovin shattered the window and dove into the fray, but the assassins fought ferociously. In the brutal clash, Mikkel suffered a horrific wound, losing vision in one of his eyes. As the dust settled, Mikkel dropped a bombshell. Ardo wasn't actually the Lord's blood son, which meant he held no legitimate claim to the family's power. Mikkel produced undeniable proof exposing Ardo's true lineage. Harnov stood frozen in shock, but Tovin warned him to stay alert since danger still loomed. Delira openly confessed her cult ties, casting aside all secrets to claim the family medallion. Tovin lunged at her bodyguards, just as Renika, Valara, and Osla stormed in to join the fight. Delira reached for a monster transformation potion, only for Tovin to suppress her with dragon magic. A sickly green light erupted from her pendant right as Ardo rushed in to defend his mother. The moment Ardo touched the necklace, he mutated into a towering, hideous orc, leaving Delira sobbing and begging Tovin to spare his life. She broke down, admitting she joined the cult 2 decades ago solely to deceive Harnov and secure a noble title for her son. Working together, the allies scrambled to restrain Ardo without inflicting lethal harm. Osla immobilized the beast's arms, while Valara pinned its legs with throwing daggers, complemented by Sprig's binding vines. Renika delivered a devastating blow that drove Ardo's human form straight out of the monster's back. Tovin unleashed his dragon flames to incinerate the empty, monstrous husk once and for all. With the threat neutralized, Harnov resolved to raise Ardo as his own, bloodline notwithstanding. Yet their trouble was far from over when they spotted a man resembling the guard waiting ahead. The figure was actually a cult assassin in disguise, who had severely injured Junia and used her as a shield to taunt them. The fake guard proved to be a formidable combatant, wounding Renika during the fray. Fortunately, the real guard had survived his injuries and arrived alongside Osla to turn the tide. Tovin swiftly applied healing magic to Junia and the wounded guard, while Osla kept the killer occupied. Turning invisible, Tovin mimicked the killer's signature strike and struck him down from the shadows. Subduing the villain at last, they trapped him within a magical water cage to secure the territory. Tovin revealed that his unique ability copies opponent techniques, which allowed him to neutralize the fake guard. After moving the wounded to safety, Osla explained that the forest bears and wolf had tracked them to the manor and helped save the real guard. Torgan returned with word that the woodland monsters were tearing each other apart without leaders, allowing the companions to handle the Lord's family. Ardo discarded his arrogant demeanor, pleading with the investigators to punish him rather than his father. Valara shut down his theatrics, telling him to redeem his mother's disgraced legacy by living honorably. Since Michael held the lineage medallion, Valara formally named him the new Lord of Grendale. This decision saved the house from execution over the stepmother's treason and placed the realm in capable hands. Interrogating the captured cultist Kesmir, however, brought a chilling revelation. Kesmir confessed he submitted to the cult because their master possessed power far beyond even elite warriors like Osla. Before he could disclose the master plan, a sinister curse severed his tongue to silence him. Unfazed by the dark magic, Tovin channeled his aura to elevate his healing spell. He fully regenerated Kesmir's tongue and even restored sight to Mikkel's blind eye. With Mikkel installed as ruler and Grendale secured, Tovin and his allies prepared for the journey back to Orenhold. However, the giant mother bear, her cub, and the wolf refused to part from Tovin's side. To slip the massive beasts past city checkpoints, Valara leveraged her official credentials to bluff the sentries. She stubbornly insisted the massive mother bear was merely a particularly ugly, exotic breed of horse. Absurd as the story sounded, it fooled the guards and ensured a smooth trek home. Meanwhile, back in Mariel's kingdom, the opposing cult leader fumed in frustration. He realized a single group of adventurers had systematically dismantled his operations across multiple territories. Concluding that covert infiltration was no longer sufficient, he began amassing a massive war host against the kingdom. Tovin's party reached Orenhold without encountering a single obstacle. Travel proved effortless as the towering bear and wolf terrified every wild monster off the main road. Upon arrival, Tovin met with Wendrick, who stared in disbelief at the tamed high-rank beasts. Impressed by how gentle the creatures acted toward Tovin's companions, Wendrick officially granted him A-rank tamer status. Pleased with the recognition, Tovin promised to continue his formal training at the facility, rather than relying solely on enchanted gear. Over at the royal castle, Valara conferred with King Aldemar and her brother Torgen. Analyzing the cult's movements, they resolved to curb ore exports to the neighboring realm to stall their war preparations. They also arranged to post additional scouts along the kingdom's borders. Back at his estate, Tovin received an unannounced visit from Marlowe, the merchant handling his fashion line. Marlowe presented 2 lucrative contracts, designing wardrobes for Astrid's theater and a bespoke gown for a prominent noblewoman. Tovin accepted the commission, recognizing the tremendous value of the noble dress contract. While Tovin worked, the baby frost tiger slipped out of the taming facility and arrived at his doorstep with its mother in hot pursuit. Seeing how attached the tigers were to Tovin, Windrick urged him to house the beasts permanently. To accommodate his growing menagerie, Tovin hired the master craftsman Haskell to renovate his grounds. Together, they constructed a new stable, a stone cave for the bear family, and set ground for a custom aquatic feature. That feature became a dedicated pond, supplied with fresh water from the local river. Once construction concluded, the household gathered outside to officially name their new companions. They christened the wolf Fangor, named the bear cub Bruno, and dubbed the mother bear Ursula. The frost tiger cubs pouted slightly over not receiving proper names yet, though the entire pack finally settled down in their new monster garden. Right as Tovin made himself comfortable, an unexpected visitor arrived to disrupt the peace. Stretched out on the sofa, Tovin found himself completely pinned by his creatures. Bruno the bear cub rested its heavy head on one leg, while a frost tiger cub claimed the other, with Sprig perched lightly on his shoulder, all clinging to him like needy children. Renika slipped beside him and confessed her loneliness after missing out on real date nights, prompting Tovin to press a reassuring kiss to her lips, which inspired her to pledge even greater effort toward becoming a formidable adventurer at his side. Glancing toward the window, Tovin scanned for any sign of his teacher Valara lurking outside, yet the courtyard remained empty until Fangor the wolf let out a sharp bark. Stepping out to the front gate, Tovin discovered Astrid the Idol, alongside her trainee Pippa and manager Venora. Though the massive bear and wolf startled the trio, Tovin quickly clarified his new status as an A-rank tamer. Once settled indoors for conversation, Astrid delivered troubling news from the city. A phantom had begun haunting the local theater, terrifying the performers on stage. Trembling at the mention of spirits, Renika clamped onto Tovin's arm in sheer panic. Astrid frantically explained that the performers absolutely refused to step foot inside the haunted building. Tovin quickly hitched his horses. Tovin guided Astrid and Renika aboard the carriage and drove them through the bustling capital streets toward the Royal Theater. Astrid chewed her lip anxiously during the ride. Renika stared silently out the carriage window as Tovin pulled up to the grand venue and secured the horses near the main entrance. A nervous stage manager named Maudry waited by the brass doors. Maudry clutched a massive ring of keys while constantly glancing over her shoulder in sheer terror. Recounting her encounter, Maudry gestured wildly to describe a shadowy figure floating across the mezzanine. Maudry pointed toward the dark lobby windows, detailing exactly where the unnatural chill usually began to manifest. Tovin tracked her pointing finger as Maudry described the daily sunset disturbances. Tovin drew his dragon-tooth blade. Renika stepped forward and boldly shoved past Tovin to take the lead position. Renika pushed the heavy brass doors wide open, despite her hands shaking violently from her deep fear of ghosts. Tovin watched Renika march straight into the pitch-black lobby with her fists raised high. Astrid followed closely behind Tovin as they crossed the threshold into the cavernous theater. Scanning the massive lobby, Tovin confirmed it stood completely empty of patrons, staff, or performers. Tovin conjured a small flame in his palm to illuminate the grand carpeted staircase ahead of them. Watching closely, Tovin saw a blast of freezing air sweep down the stairs and extinguish his fire. Renika shivered violently in the sudden cold, but kept her martial arts stance perfectly steady. Maudry led the group slowly up the steps toward the main auditorium. Leading them higher, Maudry stops near a shattered glass oil lamp scattered across the landing. Pantomiming her escape, Maudry pointed at the broken glass she dropped while fleeing the previous night. Tovin knelt near the shards and spotted deep, aggressive gouges carved directly into the wooden floorboards. Tovin traced the heavy scratch marks trailing straight toward the thick velvet curtains of the main stage. Renika stepped over the broken glass and marched directly toward the dark stage doors without hesitation. Pushing the heavy wooden doors open, Renika revealed the pitch-black expanse of the performance area. Tovin walked past her and manifested a brighter flame. Huddling close to Maudry near the entrance, Astrid watched the flickering shadows dance wildly. Renika stepped onto the scarred stage floor and immediately dropped into a defensive martial stance. Holding his fire higher, Tovin noticed a massive sandbag swinging back and forth on its thick rope. Madri gasped loudly and pointed toward the empty orchestra pit. Stepping toward the edge, Tovin peered down into the darkened hollow where musicians usually sat. Tovin watched a sudden blast of icy wind tear through the auditorium and extinguish his flame. Renika held her ground in the absolute darkness while her teeth chattered loudly from the deep cold. Startled by a sharp scratching sound from the floorboards, Astrid clamped her hands over her ears. Tovin quickly drew his dragon-tooth blade and cast a steady fire spell to push back the darkness. From the center of the stage, Tovin watched a thick layer of frost rapidly spreading outward. Renika marched directly toward the freezing epicenter, with her fists raised high and ready to strike. Panicking in the shadows, Madri turned to run away, but tripped heavily over a loose rigging cable. Tovin quickly helped Madri stand up, while holding his fiery sword high to cast a protective light across the cavernous back wall. Right as Astrid pulled Madri toward the exit doors, a thick gray mist began pouring from the rafters. Renika stood still as the fog completely engulfed her. Sprinting toward the swirling mist, Tovin held his blade ready to protect his brave companion. Renika unleashed a fierce punch into the fog, but struck absolutely nothing except empty, freezing air. Stopping dead in his tracks, Tovin watched the gray vapor condense into a solid pillar of white light. Renika lowered her fists and watched the bright pillar shape itself into the form of a tall woman. Hovering inches above the frost, the spectral woman stared down at Renika while wearing an ancient theatrical pearl gown. Tovin stepped forward to shield Renika. Gripping his sword tightly, Tovin watched the tall phantom raise a translucent hand to point at him. The ghost locked eyes with Tovin and spoke aloud, demanding to know who interrupted her performance. Tovin slowly lowered his glowing blade. Staring into the bright light, Tovin told the phantom that her harsh, demanding voice sounded completely unmistakable. The spectral woman glared down in absolute silence. Renika kept her fists raised tight as the freezing mist swirled violently around her boots. Tovin stepped into the frost and directly addressed the phantom as Korgath. Instantly, the ancient theatrical pearl gown dissolved into a shapeless cloud of gray vapor. The tall female illusion melted away entirely to reveal the grotesque, scarred face of the ancient ruler from the royal castle. Korgath descended slowly toward the floorboards and crossed his arms. Recognizing the young warrior's face, the ghost grumbled a quiet acknowledgement. Korgath angrily muttered that he never wanted to cross paths with Tovin ever again. Renika dropped her aggressive martial stance and stepped backward in total confusion. Throwing her arms up in frustration, Renika demanded to know why a pacified royal ghost was haunting a public stage. Tovin asked Korgath to explain why he abandoned the peaceful afterlife. Floating forward, Korgath opened his mouth wide to explain his sudden chaotic return to the mortal realm. A violent spasm suddenly twisted the phantom's translucent features. Korgath clawed frantically at his own throat, as if choking on heavy, invisible chains. Astrid peeked out cautiously from behind the thick velvet curtains. Panicking from the shadows, Astrid yelled that they desperately needed someone who could handle advanced spirit magic. The heavy brass doors at the far back of the theater suddenly crashed wide open. Nevin sprinted down the center aisle while clutching his specialized spirit channeling tools tight against his chest. Breathing heavily, Nevin shouted a quick apology to Tovin for arriving so late to the investigation scene. Rushing up the side stairs, Nevin vaulted directly onto the frosted wooden stage. Nevin pointed a glowing wooden talisman straight at the struggling ghost. Korgath collapsed onto his ghostly knees while thrashing wildly in silent agony. Stepping closer, Nevin began chanting a diagnostic spell to analyze the erratic energy radiating from the phantom's core. Nevin finished his diagnostic chant and swept his wooden talisman through the freezing mist. The tool projected a green light around Korgath. Korgath stopped thrashing. Nevin slowly circled the glowing ring, keeping his eyes fixed on the shivering ghost as he analyzed the spiritual damage. Tovin held his blazing sword high to provide steady light for the examination. Renika lowered her fists and took a cautious step toward the center of the stage. Hiding near the back curtains, Astrid and Madri watched the ritual in total silence. Nevin lowered his talisman and announced that Korgath was not lingering here by his own will. Korgath nodded his translucent head frantically. Nevin explained that an immensely powerful external force had dragged Korgath all the way back from the peaceful real afterlife. Toven pointed at Korgath. Toven asked why Korgath was completely unable to answer their questions. Korgath simply tapped a trembling spectral finger against his own firmly sealed lips. Nevin touched the tip of his glowing talisman directly against Korgath's neck. A visible ripple of spiritual energy washed over Korgath's gray skin. Nevin told the group that a malicious binding curse was physically holding Korgath's tongue and keeping him totally silent. Renika crossed her arms and stared at the suffering phantom with deep pity. Toven asked if Nevin could shatter the silencing magic right now. Nevin shook his head while pulling his wooden tool away from Korgath. Nevin stated that breaking the bind required finding the physical anchor holding Korgath in this building. Korgath suddenly raised his shaking hand and pointed directly at his own chest. Nevin channeled another burst of power through his talisman to illuminate Korgath's torso. The gray mist parted to reveal a jagged purple brand burned deep into Korgath's spirit form. Renika and Astrid walked onto the frosty stage to see what Nevin had uncovered. Nevin showed the glowing mark to Toven, Renika, and Astrid while they all stared at it together. Toven leaned close to inspect the glowing purple brand burned into Korgath's spectral chest. Renika pointed at the jagged lines and stated that they perfectly matched the dark curse from Grendel. Toven nodded, stating aloud that it was the exact same hex that sliced off Kesmir's tongue. The heavy theater doors slammed open. Valara marched straight down the center aisle while dragging a massive map behind her. A muddy border scout named Osmond trailed closely behind her, carrying a heavy burlap sack. Spotting the floating frost and the bound ghost, Valara dropped her map onto the front row seats. Valara vaulted the orchestra pit and landed on the frozen stage. Nevin kept his wooden talisman aimed at Korgath to keep the jagged brand fully illuminated. Valara pointed at the purple mark and identified it aloud as a sinister binding oath. Tracing her finger through the freezing mist, Valara stated firmly that only the Covenant priests utilized this specific silencing magic. Korgath nodded his translucent head frantically at her words, lowering his blazing sword. Toven asked Valara why she tracked them down here. Snatching her map from the seats, Valara spread the thick parchment across the frosty floorboards. Osmond climbed up the side stairs and dumped his bag. The coarse bag tipped over, spilling chunks of raw iron ore across the hand-drawn border lines. Osmond pointed a dirt-stained finger at a hidden mountain pass sketched on the parchment. Explaining the ongoing smuggling, Osmond reported that a massive caravan of smuggled metal was actively slipping past the royal blockade every single night. Renika picked up a jagged piece of ore and examined the fresh pickaxe marks on its surface. Tobin traced the drawn mountain route connecting their kingdom directly to Thornreach territory. Valara crossed her arms, noting that the neighboring kingdom of Thornreach was utilizing this exact smuggled metal to forge countless weapons for an impending war. Astrid stepped out from the velvet curtains to look down at the spilled iron stones. Osmond pulled a crumpled manifesto from his pocket. Osmond handed the document directly to Toven. Toven unrolled the paper and found a familiar scorpion seal stamped directly at the very bottom of the threatening letter. Toven held the crumpled manifesto close to the bright glow of Nevin's wooden talisman. Renika leaned in carefully to inspect the black scorpion ink stamped onto the page. Pointing at the symbol, Valara stated that the Covenant cult utilized this exact seal. Toven stared silently at the shivering phantom. Toven reminded everyone about the captured cultist Kesmir back in Grendel territory. Tracing his own throat, Toven recalled how this exact dark magic severed Kesmir's tongue. Valara crossed her arms tight against her chest. Valara declared that the sinister Pope used this binding oath to silence his enemies. Korgath frantically tapped his translucent purple brand in enthusiastic agreement. Osmond kicked a raw iron chunk across the frosty wooden stage. Gesturing to the map, Osmond reported that cult operatives guarded the mountain paths. Toven stared down at the hand-drawn map, charting the secret route into Thornreach. Renika punched her open palm. Renika shouted that the Pope was deliberately arming their neighboring rival kingdom. Picking up a heavy iron stone, Toven weighed the jagged stolen metal in his bare hand. Toven stated that the cult was silencing Korgath to hide this impending invasion. Astrid gasped from her dark hiding spot behind the thick velvet curtains. Korgath fell to his ghostly knees and clawed silently at his sealed ethereal lips. Nevin lowered his glowing wooden talisman and shook his head in complete frustration. Nevin explained that tracking the binding ritual required consulting official documents. Valara tapped her chin thoughtfully while staring down at the cursed purple brand. Valara noted that Covenant priests logged every single magical oath in their holy texts. Toven tossed the iron ore chunk back onto the scattered pile across the floorboard. Gripping his blazing dragon-toothed sword, Toven turned away from the freezing stage mist. Toven decided out loud that the answer was in the church's ceremony records. naming the archive as where they must go next. Toven pushed open the heavy iron doors of the central church archive. Renika stepped inside, sneezing loudly as thick dust swirled into the glowing light of the corridor. Nevin guided Korgath through the entrance, using the steady beam of his wooden talisman. Valara pointed toward a hunched figure working quietly at a massive wooden desk in the back corner. A meticulous archivist named Andrik carefully adjusted his thick spectacles. Andrik slowly flipped a brittle parchment page inside a towering historical ledger. Toven approached the massive desk and asked to closely inspect the ancient ceremony records for a specific binding oath. Startled by the sudden request, Andrik peered closely at the glowing, ghostly emperor hovering nearby. Andrik dropped his brass quill pen directly onto the wooden floorboards in sheer disbelief. Rather than sounding a loud alarm, Andrik muttered quietly about irritating historical filing errors. Andrik pulled a heavy iron key from his worn belt. Valara watched closely as Andrik unlocked a heavily reinforced metal cabinet hidden behind the shelves. Dragging out a massive leather-bound book, Andrik slammed it down onto the desk. A thick cloud of gray dust billowed upward into the bright light of Nevin's magical tool. Andrik opened the heavy cover to reveal pages completely filled with intricate magical oaths. Toven leaned forward to examine the dark ink. Tracing his bony finger down the page, Andrik pointed out a specific recorded date to the young noble. Andrik complained aloud that the binding rituals suddenly began appearing halfway through the church timeline. Renika crossed her arms and stared down at the blatantly mismatched dates on the old parchment. Andrik pulled out an original founding text to directly compare the two conflicting historical timelines. Placing the massive books side by side, Andrik tapped the missing centuries of ritual documentation with deep frustration. Toven asked Korgath if the Covenant priests performed such silencing ceremonies during his ancient reign. Korgath vigorously shook his translucent head. The bound phantom gestured widely to indicate his empire was completely free of any mandatory church oaths. Nevin lowered his wooden talisman and stepped closer to the scattered ancient texts to read the false entries. Nevin pointed his wooden talisman directly at the top margin of the open ledger. Reading the faded ink aloud, Nevin announced that the binding rituals began exactly 3 centuries after the church was built. Toven stepped back from the massive desk and sheathed his blazing dragon-tooth blade. Looking at the shivering ghost, Toven stated that mere mortals invented the silencing curse long after the empire fell. Valara crossed her arms and declared that any man-made spell could easily be shattered. Renika pumped her bare fist, eager to shatter the dark magic. Nevin aimed his wooden talisman directly toward the meticulous clerk. Nevin asked Andrik to surrender the original formula used to craft the purple brand. Andrik pushed his thick spectacles up his nose and stared at the towering bookshelves. The clerk gently traced the spine of the false history ledger with a trembling finger. Andrik muttered that the mismatched paperwork had irritated his sense of order for decades. Turning back to the heavily reinforced cabinet, Andrik retrieved a small, iron-bound tome. Andrik clutched the heavy book against his chest and looked directly at the glowing ghost. Andrik whispered that exposing the church secrets would undoubtedly cost him his entire position. Valara placed a reassuring hand upon the archivist's trembling shoulder. Taking a deep breath, Andrik held the iron-bound tome out toward the young noble. Toven stepped forward and grabbed the heavy book. Opening the thick cover, Toven saw pages filled with exact counterspells for the dark oaths. Korgath drifted closer and pointed his translucent finger at a dispelling incantation. Nevin leaned in to examine the text under the bright green light of his wooden channeling tool. Renika patted Andrik on the back, nearly knocking the frail clerk off his feet. Toven thanked the brave archivist and tucked the heavy tome tightly under his arm. Valara turned and marched straight toward the heavy iron doors of the dim corridor. Nevin guided Korgath and the rest of the team out into the hallway. Toven held the record book in his hands, while Andrik was left standing alone in the archive. Toven stepped out into the dim corridor and discovered Asla standing frozen like a statue. A tall man named Vestrin stood calmly at the far end of the hallway, blocking their only exit. Vestrin wore plain white robes rather than the extravagant garments typical of a high priest. Valara stopped dead in her tracks, immediately recognizing the man as the absolute supreme leader of the terrifying Covenant cult. Vestrin clasped his bare hands behind his back and stared directly at the heavy iron-bound book. The cult leader spoke in a quiet, measured tone, completely devoid of malice or outright anger. Vestrin calmly explained that his ancient binding ceremonies gave every single wandering soul a necessary and designated purpose in life. Gesturing to Korgath, Vestrin argued that strict structure kept the world safe. Toven gripped the heavy ledger tighter and shook his head. Vestrin stated that shattering those sacred oaths would merely plunge the entire peaceful realm straight back into devastating chaos. Renika raised her bare fists but hesitated slightly under the crushing pressure radiating from him. Asla stepped out of the shadows to position herself directly between Toven and the cult leader. The elderly martial artist warned Vestrin to step aside or face the absolute full force of her lightning-infused true breath technique. Vestrin offered a sorrowful smile and refused to yield his ground. Asla lunged forward with blinding speed to deliver a heavy palm strike. Vestrin simply stood perfectly still, without even raising his bare hands to block the incoming attack. A terrifying surge of dark magic erupted from Vestrin's chest and shattered Asla's defensive aura. The sheer force of the invisible impact hurled Asla violently backward through the dusty air. Asla crashed heavily into the solid stone wall and slumped to the floor, completely unconscious. Toven watched the legendary warrior fall in a single moment, without Vestrin ever throwing a punch. Toven instantly sheathed his blazing dragon-tooth blade. Toven knew he stood absolutely no chance of winning a direct physical fight against this terrifying opponent. Toven locked eyes with Nevin and subtly pointed a finger toward the shivering, ghostly emperor. Nevin tightened his grip on his glowing wooden talisman to keep the trembling phantom entirely steady and anchored. Vestrin took a slow, deliberate step forward down the corridor to reclaim the stolen archive ledger. Vestrin paused his advance to gesture calmly toward the shivering, ghostly emperor. Vestrin argued aloud that the ancient binding oaths gave every wandering soul a necessary place. Toven clutched the heavy record book tight against his chest. Extending an open hand, Vestrin asked Toven why he wanted to plunge the peaceful world back into chaos. Toven shook his head and stepped backward toward the heavy iron doors. Renika quickly slung the unconscious Asla over her broad shoulders. Valara drew a throwing dagger, but kept her distance from the terrifying cult leader. Vestrin lowered his hand and simply continued his slow walk down the corridor. The plain white robes of the cult leader fluttered slightly as he closed the distance. Toven stepped away from the overwhelming presence, instead of raising his sword to strike. Toven pointed at the heavy iron doors, signaling his friends to secure the bound, ghostly witness. Toven shouted for Nevin to fall back immediately into the safety of the dark street. Nevin nodded and walked backward while keeping his wooden talisman aimed directly at Korgath. Korgath floated through the exit doors alongside the retreating young spirit medium. Vestrin raised a bare hand toward the escaping ghost. Toven instantly swung his blazing dragon-tooth blade in a wide arc across the stone floorboards. A massive wall of roaring fire erupted right in the middle of the narrow archive hallway. The sudden inferno completely blocked Vestrin from seeing the fleeing group. Valara and Renika sprinted out of the building with the injured martial artist bouncing on Renika's back. Toven cast levitation magic on himself to hover swiftly backward through the thick gray smoke. Vestrin stood perfectly still before the roaring flames, without showing a single trace of anger. The cult leader simply clasped his hands behind his back and watched the brilliant fire burn. Toven soared out into the open night air while keeping the heavy record book tucked under his arm. Nevin successfully guided the bound ghost away from the church grounds using his glowing green light. Toven landed safely near his friends, while Vestrin remained inside, holding the ground he won. Toven guided his companions into a cramped storage cellar hidden just off the main street. Renika gently laid Asla onto a pile of grain sacks. Nevin swept his glowing talisman across the dark room. The green light pulsed rapidly, pointing straight toward a wooden door at the back of the cellar. Toven kicked the rotting door wide open and raised his blazing sword to illuminate the hidden space. A young novice named Avani knelt on the cold stone floor. Avani clutched a heavy purple crystal tight against her chest while surrounded by flickering candles. The crystal radiated the exact same jagged light as the brand burned into Korgath's spectral chest. Seeing armed intruders invade her sanctuary, Avani squeezed her eyes shut and chanted a desperate prayer. Toven sheathed his fiery sword instantly. Raising his empty hands, Toven stepped forward slowly toward the huddled young girl. Renika took a slow, deliberate step forward and gently asked Avani to put the glowing stone down. Avani frantically shook her head and pushed herself backward until her shoulders hit the solid stone wall. The novice announced loudly that her sacred lifelong duty was to contain a terrifying, world-ending demon. Valara crossed her arms and glared down at the dark artifact. Pointing directly at Avani, Valara stated firmly that the Covenant priests completely lied to her about her holy mission. Korgath drifted slowly through the doorway behind the bright green light of Nevin's channeling tool. Avani opened her eyes and stared in absolute shock at the towering, translucent gray phantom floating before her. The bound ghost pointed a trembling, ethereal finger directly at the humming purple crystal in Avani's bare hands. Nevin explained that Avani was the living magical anchor, forcing Korgath to remain silent and bound to the earthly realm. Avani looked down at her glowing artifact, and then back up at the scarred, spectral emperor hovering in the cellar. Tovin stepped aside to let the bound ghost float closer to the trembling young novice. Korgath hovered inches above the stone floor and looked down at Avani with a surprisingly soft, sorrowful expression. The phantom gently tapped his own sealed lips before gesturing with an open palm toward Avani's frightened face. Avani clutched the crystal tighter, insisting loudly that the dark spirit would destroy the world if released. Tobin stepped forward and executed Fenjal's empathy technique to forge a glowing magical link between the phantom and the novice. Avani gasped loudly as the bright tether illuminated the cramped storage cellar. Korgath projected a shimmering illusion of his ancient daughter, Princess Ilyana, directly into the air between them. The spectral emperor knelt gracefully on the cold stone floor to match Avani's height. Nevin held his wooden talisman steady to maintain the spiritual connection without causing harm. Tovin watched tears well up in Avani's eyes as she witnessed the phantom's gentle, sorrowful expressions. Korgath gently pointed at Avani and then pantomimed cradling a small child close to his chest. The ghost conjured brief, peaceful visions of a happy family to prove he harbored absolutely no violent malice. Renika lowered her fists completely and smiled softly at the quiet interaction. Avani looked down at the humming purple crystal, vibrating in her trembling hands. Valara watched the young girl slowly shake her head in profound realization. Avani slowly uncurled her fingers from the jagged, dark artifact. Korgath reached out and gently rested his translucent gray hand just above Avani's head. Avani placed the glowing purple crystal directly onto the stone floor and pulled her hands away. Instantly, the jagged purple brand burned into Korgath's spectral chest began to crack and splinter. Tovin watched the dark, magical lines shatter like fragile glass across the phantom's torso. The purple crystal on the floor flared brightly, before dissolving into a pile of ordinary gray ash. Avani stood up slowly and wiped the heavy tears from her pale cheeks. Nevin lowered his wooden talisman as the freezing mist completely vanished from the small room. Korgath floated upward and settled his ethereal boots firmly onto the floorboards. The dark magical aura completely faded away from Korgath's ghostly form. Renika stepped back to give the freed ghostly emperor plenty of space. Tovin extinguished his blazing sword, leaving only the flickering cellar candles to illuminate the space. The tall phantom took a deep, visible breath of the damp cellar air. Korgath freely spoke his first unsealed words aloud, while Avani stood quietly beside him. Aldemar and Torgan rode a royal carriage across the heavily guarded Thornreach border. Torgan watched a vast army of armed mercenaries guarding the pass leading directly to the palace. Aldemar stepped down from the carriage. Radomir climbed slowly out of the transport wagon. Radomir kept his head held high, despite his heavy iron restraints. A pair of Thornreach guards guided Aldemar and Torgan into a massive stone throne room, illuminated by dozens of burning chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. The monarch sat casually upon his high seat, while weighing a smuggled iron ore chunk in his bare palm. Aldemar marched straight to the throne and slammed the heavy church archive book onto the stone table. Torgan flipped the thick parchment pages to reveal the blatantly forged historical ceremony dates hidden within the official records. Pointing at the dark ink, Torgan traced the empty pages where Vestrin's sacred authority should have been recorded. The monarch dropped the iron ore chunk onto the floorboards. Aldemar crossed his arms and stated aloud that the promised territorial claims were nothing but forged lies. The monarch furrowed his brow while tracing the conflicting dates with his own bare index finger. Radomir stepped forward and presented his own scarred shoulder directly to the seated ruler. The jagged remnants of the dark scorpion brand remained visible across Radomir's pale skin. Radomir pulled a shattered monster potion vial from his pocket and tossed it directly onto the stone table. Staring directly at the monarch, Radomir declared that Vestrin merely exploited grief for raw power to seize the neighboring lands. Radomir nodded firmly and stepped backward into the shadows of his heavy iron chains. The monarch stared silently at the broken magical oath recorded inside the massive open archive book. Reaching across the stone table, the monarch pushed the open archive book back toward the diplomats. The monarch ordered his military generals to immediately stand down all border scouts and invasion forces. Torgan unrolled a fresh parchment map across the stone table table to negotiate a legitimate trade route directly bypassing Vestron's influence. Aldemar and the monarch shook hands over the map to officially establish an open, peaceful ore exchange. Radomir watched Aldemar roll up the signed treaty map, while a quiet smile spread across his tired face. A frantic scout handed Aldemar a letter announcing that the city theater was opening to a full house for Korgath to speak. Aldemar broke the heavy wax seal on the urgent parchment delivered by the breathless scout. The monarch leaned forward across his massive stone table to observe the sudden commotion. Aldemar scanned the frantic handwriting, detailing a massive public gathering taking place inside the distant capital city. Torgen stepped closer to read the parchment over Aldemar's shoulder. The scout gasped for air while describing the massive crowds already flooding the streets. Radomir listened quietly from the shadows of his heavy iron chains. Radomir smiled, knowing his long-awaited testimony against Vestron was finally about to happen. The scarred guildmaster relaxed his tense shoulders, satisfied that the truth would finally shatter the cult. The monarch gestured to his generals to officially dismantle the remaining border blockade. Heavy armored guards immediately marched out of the cavernous throne room to relay the stand-down orders across the border. Torgen rolled up the signed ore treaty and tucked it securely into his leather satchel. Aldemar folded the scout's urgent letter and tucked it inside his tunic. The monarch offered a respectful nod to the departing diplomats. Aldemar bowed deeply to the seated ruler before turning toward the grand wooden doors. A pair of Thornreach sentries stepped aside to clear the exit path. Torgen guided Radomir carefully out of the dim throne room and into the bright courtyard. Aldemar ordered his carriage driver to prepare the horses for an immediate return journey. The exhausted scout climbed onto the back of the royal wagon. Radomir settled into the cushioned carriage seat, staring out at the retreating armies. Torgen climbed aboard next and signaled the driver to launch the horses forward. The royal transport sped away from the Thornreach border, leaving the abandoned invasion plans and the scattered armies far behind. Aldemar rode in silence, calculating the sheer impact of a ghost testifying against Vestron. Torgen watched the distant capital skyline slowly come into view through the carriage window. Aldemar pulled the urgent letter from his tunic to read the final sentence aloud to his companions. Aldemar announced aloud that the theater was opening to a full house for Korgath to speak. Thousands of citizens crammed into the velvet theater seats. Toven peered carefully through the heavy red curtains to observe the murmuring audience filling every available inch of the grand auditorium. Renika stood beside Toven with her hands clenched tightly into trembling fists. Nevin channeled a soft green glow from his wooden talisman to keep Korgath anchored. Korgath floated quietly in the backstage shadows while waiting for the cue to step out. Looking at the ghost, Renika took a deep breath and firmly planted her boots on the floorboards. Astrid smoothed the glittering fabric of her vibrant dress. Astrid gave Toven a confident nod before stepping directly into the bright stage lights. The massive crowd fell completely silent as Astrid raised a crystal microphone. The young idol unleashed a powerful, soaring melody that echoed across the cavernous auditorium. Dancing across the stage, Astrid captivated the nobles and commoners filling the high balconies. Toven signaled his companions to move forward as the final musical notes faded away. Renika marched boldly out onto the wide wooden stage. Renika forced her shaking knees to lock straight, standing perfectly still under the bright lights. Toven stepped up beside Renika and raised his open hands toward the chaotic audience to request their attention before the presentation. Nevin walked out from the wings while pointing his glowing talisman at the wooden floorboards. Following the green light, Korgath drifted slowly out from behind the heavy velvet curtains. Citizens gasped in sheer panic as Korgath drifted into full view of the front rows. Several wealthy patrons scrambled backward and knocked over their cushioned wooden chairs. Renika firmly held her ground beside the hovering phantom. Korgath looked down at the brave young warrior and offered a slow, respectful nod. Turning his scarred, ethereal face toward the packed auditorium, Korgath raised his hands. The phantom projected a booming, ancient voice that rattled the glass chandeliers above. Korgath commanded the terrified citizens to sit down and listen to his final mortal words. Gesturing widely, the phantom described his ancient empire that thrived for centuries without any binding church ceremonies. Korgath declared that ordinary mortal men invented the sacred oaths centuries after his reign ended. The massive audience murmured quietly while absorbing the shocking historical revelation. The phantom announced that the ceremonies could remain, but the people now knew that mere mortals created them. Renika stood perfectly still beside the towering ghost, without taking a single step backward. Looking down at the young warrior, Korgath smiled warmly to acknowledge her remarkable bravery. Toven sheathed his blazing sword. Korgath nodded slowly, announcing aloud that his final mortal task was completely finished. The ancient spectral emperor began to glow with a brilliant, peaceful white light. Astrid walked out from the wings. Raising her crystal microphone, Astrid sang a gentle lullaby to honor the departing soul. The beautiful, soaring melody washed over the completely silent auditorium. Korgath closed his ghostly eyes and listened to the soothing music with deep contentment. Nevin lowered his wooden talisman. Korgath's ethereal boots dissolved into floating particles of shimmering silver dust. Renika kept her fists unclenched and watched the peaceful transition without any trace of panic. The terrified wealthy nobles in the front rows finally relaxed their tense shoulders. Korgath raised his translucent hand to wave a final farewell to the brave students. Tovin bowed deeply to the fading phantom as the glowing light expanded outward. Astrid hit a soaring, sustained final note that echoed beautifully across the high ceiling. The brilliant white light completely engulfed Korgath's towering, translucent form. The scarred emperor shattered into glowing motes. The glittering dust floated gently upward into the dark rafters of the cavernous theater. Tovin watched the final sparkles fade away entirely into the absolute darkness above. The heavy velvet curtains remained pulled wide open under the bright theatrical lights. The stage stood completely devoid of spirits, while Tovin and his companions remained standing upon the wooden floorboards. Haskell hammered a thick iron nail into a cracked wooden fence post near the edge of the monster garden. Renika carried a massive wooden tray piled high with steaming roasted meat out onto the sunny stone patio. Tovin stepped onto the grass, wearing a simple linen tunic. Windrick followed closely behind while clutching a heavy evaluation clipboard tight against his chest. Stepping back, Windrick ordered Tovin to demonstrate genuine taming techniques without relying on enchanted tools. Tovin unbuckled his magical leather bracers and tossed them directly into the dirt. The adult frost tiger paced anxiously back and forth in front of the newly built stone cave. Tovin lowered his stance and extended an empty palm toward the massive, snowy predator. The wild tiger bared its razor-sharp teeth and released a low, threatening growl that vibrated through the morning air of the courtyard. Tovin held his ground perfectly still, without manifesting a single protective magical barrier. Windrick watched the tense standoff without blinking. The adult tiger slowly lowered its massive head and cautiously sniffed Tovin's outstretched bare fingers. Tovin gently stroked the thick white fur along the beast's neck. The tiny frost tiger cub immediately bounded out from the shadows of the cave to tackle Tovin's heavy boots. Tovin officially named the adult mother tiger Shira. Pointing at the playful little cub, Tovin formally declared its new name to be Frost. Both tigers visibly glowed with a sudden, powerful surge of bright blue magical energy the moment they received their permanent titles. Windrick frantically checked off several passing marks on his official guild grading parchment. Renika tossed a thick cut of grilled steak across the wide yard to reward the newly named mother tiger. Haskell wiped sweat from his brow and hoisted a fresh wooden plank to continue repairing the damaged fence. Windrick covered his eyes as a violent gust of wind suddenly swept across the courtyard. Zarok descended rapidly from the clouds and landed heavily right in the center of the manicured grass. Windlass slid joyfully down the massive scaled wing of the dragon to reach the ground. Tovin caught his laughing younger sister as she sprinted directly into his open arms. Zaruk instantly shrank down into his tiny lizard form and quickly scurried up to rest upon Tovin's shoulder. Windrick handed Tovin the official passing certificate for his advanced taming examination. Tovin thanked the administrator and tucked the folded parchment directly into his tunic. Winla reached up to stroke the tiny dragon resting comfortably upon her brother's shoulder. Zaruk purred quietly and gently nuzzled his scaled head against. Renika sliced the roasted steak into portions. Shira and Frost bounded across the manicured grass toward the steaming cuts of meat. Renika tossed thick chunks of beef to the hungry tigers. Haskell hammered the last iron nail into the wooden boards. Haskell wiped his dirty hands on a rag and walked toward the stone patio to join the feast. Tovin set Winla down on the stone tiles to play. Frost playfully tackled the little girl, sending them both tumbling across the soft green lawn in a tangle of limbs and white fur. Windrick packed his clipboard away. Bidding the household farewell, Windrick walked out through the newly repaired front gate. Renika handed Tovin a wooden plate piled high with grilled meat and roasted root vegetables. Tovin sat down at the large outdoor dining table to enjoy the peaceful afternoon meal. Haskell grabbed a heavy tankard of ale and raised it to toast the successful yard renovations. Tovin clinked his own cup against the carpenter's mug before taking a long, refreshing drink. A gentle breeze swept through the courtyard, rustling the green leaves of the monster garden. Zarek leaped down from Tovin's shoulder to snatch a dropped piece of sausage from the grass. Shira settled under the shade of a large oak tree to watch her cub play with Winla. Renika took the empty seat next to Tovin and leaned her head gently against his shoulder. Tovin wrapped an arm around her, looking out across the bustling, lively courtyard with a profound sense of peace settling over his restored household. A royal messenger suddenly strode through the open gate and approached the dining area. The messenger dropped a sealed parchment directly onto the center of the wooden dining table. Tovin sat in his own yard with the next letter already lying unopened on the table.